In a town forgotten by time, where trouble rides in with the wind and legends fade slower than scars. They chose the wrong person to provoke, and by the time they realized, it was already too late. Dust clung to the bones of Grey Ridge like soot from a dying fire. The settlement, no more than a crooked lattice of sun, bleached shacks and sagging storefronts, perched on the lip of an endless prairie, bracing each sunset as though the horizon itself might swallow what little life remained. It was the summer of the lean storms, when clouds marched in with black thunderheads only to leave behind grudging dribbles of rain and the smell of ozone in cracked soil. Corn, once the town's pride, withered on the stalk and hunger prowled the alleys like a half-tamed mutt. Aveline Caro felt that hunger settle behind her ribs as a slow, gnawing ache. She'd been in the stockade for 3 days, though the sun's brutal arc made it feel like 3 eternities on nothing but sips of river, mud water a passing ranch hand had risked to spill between the wooden slats. Her wrists and ankles were locked in iron loops bolted to a post outside the courthouse so every soul in Grey Ridge could see the price of thievery. And they did see. They stared, whispered, sometimes spat. But none offered her more than pity's distant echo. Not here, where kindness was rationed thinner than flour. Aveline's crime was simple. She had stolen 2 ears of corn. Not from the gruel barrel government stores that kept orphans alive through winter, but from a private cart bound for Mayor Ruark Caldwell's own granary, a cart so heavy with yellow kernels that a few cobs had toppled free and rolled into the dirt like forgotten coins. She hadn't even tucked them beneath her shawl. She'd only cradled them, half-dazed by a hunger that blurred vision to a red-rimmed tunnel. Deputy Bramley caught her before she could take a second step. Within an hour, she was sentenced. By Caldwell himself, 7 days public starving followed by restitution labor on the mayor's estate until the debt, plus penalty, was deemed repaid. She might have accepted hard labor. She might even have endured a proper jail cell where shadows offered at least a mercy of concealment. But starvation in the July sun felt like cruelty crafted for sport. Each dusk the townsfolk listened to the mayor's booming oratory on civility and order how leniency bred thieves, how discipline preserved what little wealth Grey Ridge still clutched. Aveline listened too, though the words melted around the ringing in her ears. She tasted iron on her tongue where cracked lips bled from dryness, her thoughts warped under the heat. Faces in the crowd stretched into mirage shapes, eyes floating like dark embers. She caught herself naming them flint-eyed Mrs. Temper, who ran the boarding house and secretly watered her marigolds at night. Jory Weeks, the blacksmith's boy whose laughter once sounded like hammered silver until hunger stole even that brightness. None met her gaze long. She wondered if she looked like a ghost already, halfway between soil and sky. On the 4th morning, though, dawn's blush had only just peeled back the darkness, Aveline woke to shouting. Boots drummed the courthouse steps. She blinked sleep-stung eyes to find Deputy Bramley unlocking the stockade hinges while 2 militiamen hoisted rifles as though she might pounce on them the moment her limbs were freed. Her shoulders shrieked when metal bands opened. Blood flooded back to hands that had gone a frightening shade of blue-white. Mayor wants a spectacle, Bramley muttered, voice pinched, as he dragged her upright by the elbow. Market squares. Fooler on sale day. Aveline's throat rasped. Words refused to form. She stumbled beside him, ankles wobbling like saplings in a gale. Every step rattled pain through joints grown stiff, yet humiliation stung sharper, all around. Townsfolk paused mid-bargain to stare at the hollow-cheeked girl whose crime was tasting food she hadn't earned. Bramley chained her to a shorter post in the square, a merchant's hitching beam commandeered for punishment, and stepped back. He wasn't cruel by nature. Aveline sensed apology flickering in his downcast eyes, but apology bought no bread. The mayor arrived moments later atop his dapple gray stallion, broad-shouldered and wax-mustached, wearing a burgundy waistcoat. That announced authority louder than his voice ever could. Ruark Caldwell surveyed the crowd with theatrical sorrow. "Neighbors," he began, lifting gloved hands for quiet. "We gather, regrettably, to witness consequences. With drought choking our yields and outsiders circling like vultures, we must protect our granaries from within as fiercely as from without. This young woman," he gestured toward Aveline as though she were a prop, "chose theft over honest supplication. Mercy cannot be squandered. Discipline cannot be delayed." Aveline expected the rest, an edict extending her starvation, perhaps, or doubling her term of labor. What she did not expect was the sound of a slow, deliberate clap. From the far end of the square, a man strode forward, palms coming together with each paced step in the sort of applause that dripped disdain. He wore plain canvas trousers and a linen shirt dyed the pale green of new corn shoots. Dust powdered his sleeves, but the set of his shoulders suggested a strength farm work could not humble. His hair sun-bleached brown fell in loose waves that brushed a jaw rugged with day-old stubble. But it was his eyes that arrested Aveline, gray as smoke, bright as struck iron. "Bravo," the stranger drawled, voice carrying over hushed murmurs. "Fine sermon, Mayor. Tell me, does righteousness taste sweeter when the one you starve is barely old enough to cast a vote?" A ripple went through the bystanders. Caldwell's neck mottled. "State your business, sir." "My business," the man answered, halting 2 strides from Aveline, "is corn." He turned, addressing the onlookers now. "Name's Elias Quinn. I farm 3 miles east, over the ridge where the river forks. This year's yield was promised to Caldwell Granaries in exchange for seed and credit." A paper-thin smile touched his lips. "Seed came late, credit came dear, and still we planted. Imagine my surprise when I learned a portion of my harvest was paraded through town yesterday taxed, weighed, and claimed before I'd even signed the final ledger." Caldwell bristled. "Our contract stipulates. It stipulates that after assessment, surplus belongs to the farmer until tally." Elias's voice hardened. "Yet I find Miss Carrow punished for taking what by law was still mine." He stepped closer to Aveline, offering his hand, palm upturned, a gesture so gentle it made her chest twist. "That corn belonged to me anyway. And if a neighbor needed it, well, I would have given her half the field before letting her wither on a post." Gasps flared. Caldwell's fury lit his gaze. "You speak treason against civic order." Elias did not flinch. "I speak of fairness. Release her. If reparations are owed, take them from my yield, not her flesh." Aveline stared at the offered hand, fingers trembling inches from her face. She wanted to grasp it, to feel warmth and proof she wasn't invisible. But iron still ringed her wrists, chain links rattling with each shallow breath. Deputy Branley looked to the mayor for direction. Caldwell's jaw worked. "The law is the law. Theft demands penance." "Then take me instead," Elias said. Quietly, "I'll serve her remaining sentence. And double the labor, if that salves your pride." A hush fell so complete that even the cicadas seemed to pause. Aveline's heart hammered against bird-thin ribs. Why would any man trade freedom for a stranger? Doubt flickered. Is this some cruel show? But Elias's eyes held no jest, only a calm resolve that felt oddly unbreakable. Caldwell opened his mouth, closed it. The crowd shifted, sensing a tide. Turning, mercy, once stingy, was suddenly affordable when someone else footed the bill. But the mayor tasted challenge like vinegar. He needed this punishment to stand, to remind Grayridge who owned the town's lifelines. "Very noble," Caldwell finally said, voice slick with condescension. "Yet symbolic gestures won't sow fields. She remains incarcerated until restitution service begins." Elias tilted his head. "And if the town at large objects?" He raised his arms slowly, addressing the bystanders. "Who here recalls when decency meant feeding the hungry before fattening ledgers? How many children in Grayridge slept with Empty bellies last night while warehouses groan under private surplus. Murmurs rose. Caldwell's eyes cut to his constable's loyal men paid in grain and fear. Two advanced, rifles half raised. Elias's hands lifted, open, pacifying. I didn't come to stir riot, only to right a wrong. A distant rumble, a thunderhead growling beyond the western hills broke the stalemate. The sky over Grey Ridge had worn a gauzy whiteness all morning, but now bruised clouds gathered, promising either rain or fury. Elias lowered his voice, meant only for Aveline as he crouched beside her bound form. You've done nothing shameful, he said, and she found herself drowning in the earnestness of those gray eyes. Hold fast. In storms, the tallest corn bends slowest. Emotion swelled behind Aveline's ribs, sharp as hunger. Words escaped before caution could muzzle them. They'll break you too. Her voice was ragged, but each syllable rang with a strength she'd forgotten she possessed. Not easily, Elias replied with a faint smile. Caldwell wheeled his stallion forward, hooves striking sparks from cobblestone. Enough. He pointed a gloved finger at Elias. You will relinquish this square or face arrest for incitement. Elias rose, still calm. On whose authority? Yours? My badge. My council, my guards. And what of your people? Elias's gaze swept the crowd. Will they stand idle while justice is twisted to fit one man's purse? For a heartbeat. Silence stretched. Then an elderly woman, Mrs. Temper herself, stepped beside Elias, chin quivering yet eyes fierce. The girls served enough sun, she declared. Another voice, Jory Weeks, joined. Let her work off the rest without starving her bones. More townsfolk echoed, timid but growing. Caldwell's face darkened. Rain began to speckle dust, each drop a pinprick of damp on baked earth. Thunder rolled closer. Aveline tasted petrichor, the promise of water more nourishing than any speech. Deputy Bramley shifted, uncertainty etching his brow. Elias seized the moment, stepping forward until he stood directly beneath the mayor's stallion. Lightning forked across distant clouds, illuminating the standoff in stark white. Last offer, Elias said, voice carrying over the crackle of impending storm. Unlock her, or I walk through your granary doors tonight and reclaim every kernel owed, and I won't walk alone. Those words fell like a hammer. Caldwell's eyes flicked toward warehouses lining the southern road storehouses his private. Guard could not defend against an uprising. Sweat beaded despite cool rain. Before he could reply, another rumble split the sky closer, sharper. But this was no thunder. A rifle shot. Wood splintered beside Bramley's boots. Gasps. Chaos edged. The crowd like knives. All eyes darted to the rooftops where a lone gunman, one of Caldwell's sharpshooters, lowered his smoking barrel. Raindrops hissing on hot steel. Back! Caldwell roared, but the shooter already lined a second shot aimed squarely at Elias. Aveline's scream tore free. Elias pivoted, arms instinctively spreading to shield her, though chains would never reach him. The marksman squeezed the trigger, and the world seemed to freeze between heartbeats. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. You could taste the gunpowder before the echo of the shot finished cracking across the square. For Aveline Caro, it was not thunder, not lightning, not even the hard bay of a rifle. It was the metallic tang of death arriving faster than breath. She felt the world narrow to a single bead of moving iron, saw it streak through rain-silvered air as vivid as a comet, yet somehow also saw Elias Quinn turning, his body sliding between her and the onrushing bullet as naturally as dusk follows. The slug should have found his heart. It struck instead a spur of cast-iron hitch post just inches from Aveline's chained hands, spraying sparks and shards that stung her cheek like angry hornets. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The unseen marksman worked afresh. Cartridge into his chamber, But the moment of shock had broken Caldwell's scripted pageantry. Suddenly Greyridge was all motion, townsfolk shouting, deputies scrambling, Elias lunging to snap the rifle from Deputy Bramley's startled grip, even as Bramley tried to shout an order neither his lips nor lungs could shape. Rain came harder, hammering canvas awnings and clay roofs, turning dust to eager mud. Evelyn's chains rattled as she struggled upright muscles, screaming fatigue only to feel Elias's hands at the manacles. Bramley hadn't locked them since moving her. A simple iron latch held them closed. One tug from Elias and the cuffs parted. For the first time in 4 days, Evelyn's wrists were free. She nearly collapsed. Elias caught her by the shoulders. "Stay with me," he murmured. Rain slicked his hair against his forehead. Droplet trails turfed across stubble like silver rivers. "Can you walk?" Her throat burned, but she nodded because if he could stand between her and the bullet, she could damn well move her feet. Adrenaline lent her starving body a brittle strength. Together they half ran, half staggered toward the shelter of the Mercantile's porch. Behind them chaos intensified. Caldwell shouted for order, for arrests, for anything that resembled control. But the reins had slipped. A second rooftop rifle cracked, this time deliberately skyward, a warning shot fired not by Caldwell's men, but by Harlan Dake, the rangy freight hauler known to drink trouble like molasses yet never dish it out. He had climbed the ironwork stair of the silversmith's shop to plant himself between Caldwell's sharpshooter and the square. "Put that piece down," Harlan hollered, reloading his own battered Winchester. "Or you'll find out how many of us got sick of your boss's brass buttons." The sharpshooter, perhaps deciding dry pay wasn't worth drenched peril, lowered his carbine. Thunder this time, the honest sky. Forged Kine boomed approval. Aveline slumped against the Mercantile wall, breath rasping. Elias still held Bramley's rifle, though its muzzle pointed downward. Deputy Bramley, coat plastered to his chest, approached with palms raised. "Elias," he said, voice shaking more from moral tremor than weather, "give me the gun. Folks are scared enough." "Then keep your hands in sight," Elias answered, offering the Winchester butt first. His gaze flicked round the square. No more sharpshooters on roofs. If this town wants blood, it'll have to ask face to face. Bramley nodded, taking the weapon in trembling fingers. He looked older than his 30-odd years. Rain carved streaks through dust on his cheeks like tears. "Never meant for her to die," he mumbled, "but someone did." Elias's tone wasn't accusation so much as ledger-keeping. "Find out who." While deputies diffused rooftop hostilities, Aveline felt the first true shiver of cold, rain seeping into threadbare linen, heat leached by wind that braided through streets. She hugged herself, arms thin as reed stalks. Elias shrugged off his overshirt, a garment already soaked, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She smelled iron and loam and the ghost of corn pollen. "Thank you," she croaked. The words sounded like sand scraped across slate. He touched 2 fingers to her chin, gently tilting her face into lamplight spilling from the Mercantile window. Concern clouded gray irises. "We need you warm and dry." "I need food," she admitted, the honesty surprising her, "before I can feel anything else." Elias's mouth twitched sympathy, guilt, resolve. "We'll see to that." But Caldwell had not seeded the field. The mayor hat gone, Westcott dark with rain stood upon the courthouse steps, flanked by 3 remaining constables. He raised a lantern beneath his face, throwing sharp shadows that made him look carved. "From Bitter Oak, hear me," Caldwell bellowed, voice cracking like wet timber. "This rabble ends now. Elias Quinn, Aveline Caro, and anyone abetting their lawlessness are traitors to order. By sundown tomorrow, I expect both fugitives delivered to my custody, or I will petition Fort Trenton for militia enforcement. You think hunger's teeth are sharp? Wait until bayonets bite. In response, Mrs. Temper, the boarding house matron, struck her broom against a rain barrel, drum-like. Others joined, banging. Pots or crates, a ragged percussion that swelled until Caldwell's next words drowned beneath it. Grayridge, starved for justice, had found a voice. Caldwell retreated into the courthouse, slamming its doors. The square exhaled. Then, as though the storm's last word, lightning speared a black locust tree at the far corner, splitting it with a crack that reverberated through ribs and courthouse marble alike. The flight from town blurred, Elias guiding Aveline under lashing rain, cutting through alleys slick with runoff, past shuttered homes where lanterns flickered nervously at their passage. Twice she staggered, twice he steadied her. Hunger gnawed with renewed vigor, adrenaline's momentum failing, legs wooden. Yet each step carried the hot spark of something new. Will dot at the eastern outskirt, they reached a wagon shed. Elias ducked inside and emerged with a mud-spattered two-horse dray packed with burlap seed sacks. He boosted Aveline onto the bench, tossed a blanket over her shoulders, and clicked his tongue. The pair of bay geldings pressed into harness, hooves thudding like muffled drums as they set off across Prairie Road. Wind laid the rain sideways. Aveline squinted through sheets of water. In fitful lantern glow, she glimpsed Grayridge shrinking behind them, lantern specks amid yawning dark. Something like guilt pinched her chest. Family graves rested in that dirt. But whatever waited ahead felt less deadly than staying. Elias's farm lay beyond a low ridge where prairie dipped toward the Whisper Fork. The house appeared first a clapboard cottage, crowned by sagging tin but sturdy, its windows throwing ember warmth. Behind it loomed barns and cornfields, etched in lightning silhouette, rows bowed by drought, yet still standing. They rolled into the yard. A brindled dog barked, tail windmilling. Elias jumped down, lifting Aveline gently. Her legs gave, but he half-carried her through the doorway. Lamp-lit kitchen. Rough-hewn table sawn from walnut, clay jars of pickled okra, a kettle hissing on iron stove. The smell of wet wool and sourdough mingled with smoke curling from hearth. Despite herself, Aveline swayed, dizzy with comfort. "Sit." Elias guided her onto a bench. He stirred coals, added water to the kettle, and sliced bread. The crust crackled under his knife. Steam curled from the loaf's heart. He ladled bean stew from a pot simmering since morning, its aroma thick with ham bones and garden herbs. Aveline's hands shook so violently she nearly spilled the bowl. Elias steadied it. "Slow," he cautioned, "or you'll sicken." First. Spoonful. Warmth exploded across her tongue. Salt, smoke, thyme. Tender beans easing past cracked lips to flood empty stomach. Tears burned her eyes. Second spoonful, slower. Elias slid a plate of bread and apple wedges nearer, then moved about the kitchen with purposeful economy, hanging his coat, drying the rife, shaking rain from his hair. The dog, satisfied all intruders were friends, curled at Aveline's feet. As the bowl emptied, hunger subsided to a dull echo, replaced by exhaustion's tidal pull. Distant thunder faded. Only the roof's steady drip remained. "Why help me?" she asked, voice raw but steadier. Elias leaned against the stove, arms crossed. Shadows danced across his features. "Because needing food isn't a crime. Caldwell pretends scarcity is order. I farm, I know there's enough, if greed stops hoarding." Aveline traced rim of the wooden bowl. "He'll come for you. Let him." Firelight flickered in gray eyes. "I've less to lose than he thinks." He paused. "But you, if you want to keep running, wagon's yours by dawn." Run. The word tasted both sour and sweet. She could cross the prairie, vanish into territories where Caldwell's warrant meant nothing. Yet memory of townsfolk Jory, Mrs. Temper, even Bramley's uneasy mercy rooted her. Leaving would abandon them to Caldwell's tightening fist. And this man who'd shielded her would face retribution alone. Aveline shook her head. "I'm done fleeing." A surprising certainty in her belly. Greyridge is my home. If Caldwell wants to call me thief, I'll show him what real taking looks like. Elias's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but admiration. Rest tonight. Storms blown through. Tomorrow we plan. Morning iced the prairie in petrichor. Evelyn woke in a modest attic room, wrapped in quilts smelling of cedar and sunshine. Light filtered through calico curtains, gold and kind. For a moment she lay staring at crossbeams, cataloging sensations, fullness in belly, tingling in fingers freed from iron, muscles sore but unsubdued. Life. Downstairs she found Elias propping barn doors. Sunfire glinted off puddles in the yard. Birds gossip, chirped among cottonwoods rehydrated by night's deluge. Corn stalks, though bent, stood taller, leaves washed clean. Elias waved. Feel human? Aveline answered with a lopsided grin. Half. Better than none. He set down a feed pail. Come, needs we've got work. He led her to a low shed behind the silo. Inside, crates of seed, burlap sacks of flour, rows of mason jars, spools of wire, and against the back wall, a rack of battered farm tools. Alongside 2 pistols and a lever action rifle. Aveline's stomach fluttered. Expecting war, expecting Caldwell. Elias lifted 1 revolver, checked chambers. But guns alone won't break him. People will. The notion seemed absurd. Starved townsfolk rising against a man who controlled every grain store. Yet as Elias spoke of networks, farmers owed unpaid yields. Merchants bled by taxes. Ranchers denied river rights. Aveline recognized what she had missed in Greyridge. Caldwell's grip was firm on those closest, but his reach frayed at the edges like rope left in rain, if someone tugged hard enough. They spent the day riding field borders, speaking with neighbors. Word of the square incident had traveled faster than thunder. Some greeted them with fearful stammers, others with cautious hope. Elias spoke plainly. Caldwell's hoarding threatened not just Greyridge, but outlying farms. What lay grown in barns belonged communal until harvest delivered profit. Caldwell's private militia broke that contract. If farms withheld future deliveries, Caldwell lost leverage. But they needed Greyridge support to change council seats. Aveline, still weak, observed more than spoke, yet her presence mattered. News of the starved girl walking free, cheeks sunken, but eyes bright, galvanized hearts. At midday, a widow pressed a jar of peach preserve into Aveline's hands. To sweeten strength, she whispered. A ranch foreman offered 2 colts for courier work. By dusk half the prairie fringe had pledged to meet at Quinn Farm next night. Returning home, they spotted dust columns riding from town. Caldwell's deputies, maybe a dozen, escorting an ox-drawn wagon. Its tarpaulin sagged heavy. Supply run, Elias guessed. More grain from storehouses. He'll lock it tighter. Aveline's jaw set. Not if we reach it first. But Elias shook his head. We attack outright. We prove Caldwell right. Fear keeps folk tame. We need courage, not carnage. They reached the farmhouse under violet dusk. Aveline peeled fruit for supper while Elias pored over Ledger's crop yields. Delivery schedules, tax receipts with Caldwell's seal. The dog dozed near hearth. Wind rattled windows like a restless conscience. When stars kindled, hoofbeats echoed up the lane. Elias barred the door and slipped to a side window. Silhouettes, 3 riders halted beneath the cottonwoods. Friendlies. He murmured after a tense breath, unbarring the door. Deputy Bramley entered first, hat twisting in his hands. Behind him stepped Jory Weeks and Helena Dake Harlan's elder sister, owner of the freight stables. Bramley spoke low. Town's on edge. Caldwell's doubled the watch. Says outsiders plan to raid granaries. Blames you, Quinn. Elias indicated chairs. Sit, warm up. Helena shook her head. No time. Caldwell summoned a private Pinkerton outfit. 10 men on the noon stage tomorrow. Aveline's gut turned. Hired guns loyal to coin, not conscience. She glanced at Elias, his stare fixed on the lamp flame, though focus burned far beyond. Then we move before they arrive, he said finally. How? Jory asked. Deputies guard storehouses, scouts on rooftops. Caldwell's got the council eating from his palm. We don't storm a fortress, Elias answered. We empty it from within. He spread ledgers on the table. Caldwell's grain sits under one roof, the southeast granary. But his shipments leave by rail weekly. Tomorrow dawn he'll load wagons for trackside storage. If we intercept manifests, we prove he hoards communal stores as private stock. Council can't ignore evidence signed in his own hand. Intercept where? Bramley asked. Elias pointed to a ledger line. Way, station office. Caldwell files manifests an hour before wagons roll. Aveline leaned in. And if the council still ignores, then we let the people read. His voice held iron, plans unfurled until cocks crowed. Helena would stage a freight delay to stall wagons. Jory, with nimble fingers and the blacksmith's spare key, would lift manifests. Bramley, though still wearing a badge, pledged to smuggle papers past deputies. Aveline, despite Elias's protest, insisted on roll, copying documents in plain ink so Caldwell couldn't cry forgery. They parted before sunrise. Aveline watched silhouettes vanish into dawn haze, a flock of improbable conspirators. Beside her, Elias exhaled slow. You trust them? She asked. I trust desperation, he replied. It makes ordinary folks heroic. Greyridge awoke under pale skies. Dew twinkled, mocking drought. Aveline and Elias rode into town separately, she cloaked in a trade wagon hauling basketry. He posing as labor signing delivery dockets. Caldwell's men swarmed streets, rifles slung, eyes wary. Yet vigilance waned where routine hummed. Drovers argued cattle prices. Schoolchildren filed to lessons. Church bell told modest blessings. Amid that ordinary din, alliance threads knotted. Helena blocked depot entrance with a broken axle cart, feigning misery while her brothers pretended to wrestle stubborn mules. Deputies cursed it at the delay but couldn't risk spooking livestock. Calico, skirted Mrs. Temper, strolled by offering lemonade laced with laudanum to any guard too hot under the collar. Within the weighing office, Jory Weeks posing as errand boy slipped sealed manifests into a satchel. Bramley intercepted him in alleyway, transferring contraband beneath folded maps. Aveline waited in the schoolhouse basement, chalk dust swirling in sunbeams, slicing cracked windows. Her heart pounded so fierce she feared guards upstairs would hear. When Bramley descended the steps, both sighed. She drafted copies quick yet meticulous, hands steadier than she expected. Caldwell's signature looped like a snake on every page. Beside tallies that dwarfed official supply reports. Enough grain to feed Greyridge, thrice oversat slated for private sale downline. They finished as noon bell rang. The same moment Pinkerton's stage rattled into town, iron wheels screeching. Through narrow window Aveline glimpsed black-coated men with bowler hats and repeating rifles. Time's gone, Bramley whispered. They split. Bramley would deliver originals to council clerk. Aveline smuggled copies to Elias at Harlan's freight yard. Street edges tightened under her boots. Pinkertons fanned out, cold eyes scanning faces. One brushed past her, gaze snagging on dirt-smeared skirt. She forced breath calm, clutching basket lid over documents. He moved on. Freight yard's south gate loomed. Then shouts, Pinkertons barking. Aveline wrist glanced back. Caldwell himself pointing toward her, mustache bristling. Deputies advancing. Run. She bolted under stacked crates, skirts whipping. The basket lid flew. Pages fluttered skyward like startled gulls. She snatched one, dodged between hay bales. Footsteps thundered behind. Ahead, yard opened to rail spur. Freight wagons queued. Elias stood atop a grain stack, directing workers. Their eyes met hers wide with alarm. Then 2 Pinkertons crashed through fence at her heels. "Elias!" she cried. He vaulted down, meeting her mid-sprint. She shoved. The last intact manifest at him. Others lost. Breath ragged, he scanned bold ink, jaw tightening. "One's enough." Then louder, to workers. "You all saw Caldwell's men try to burn evidence." Pinkertons raised rifles. Elias thrust. The paper high. "This is proof of theft." His voice carried above wagon clang. "He hoards grain while children starve." A murmur anger hot as forge rippled among laborers. Someone shouted, "Show us." Before Elias could, a rifle butt smashed into his ribs. He crumpled, paper tearing loose into wind. Aveline shrieked, lunged, but a Pinkerton grabbed her arms. Another cocked hammer level with Elias's skull. Caldwell strode into yard, raindrop mustache twitching triumph. "Told you order would return." He nodded to gunmen. "Make example." Aveline's scream strangled as she thrashed against. Iron grip. Workers froze, some stepping back. Fear rooting courage. Pinkerton thumbed trigger. Then a crack not of gunfire but of whip. Helena Dake, atop freight wagon, snapped a braided hide line across gunman's wrist. Rifle fired wild, bullet-punching sky. Chaos erupted. Harlan swung a grain shovel, flattening another Pinkerton. Workers surged, anger ignited. Caldwell's shout lost in rising roar. Aveline tore free, dropped beside Elias. Blood stained his lip but eyes burned clear. "Time to bend tall corn," he rasped. They rose together. Aveline snatched fallen rifle, unfamiliar weight, settling with shocking rightness. Memory of being bound in courthouse sun, of hunger's acid, of Caldwell's contempt, coalesced to singular clarity. She cycled lever, chambering round. Pinkertons regrouped near wagon. Caldwell stumbled behind them, face blanching. Elias lifted shovel handle like quarterstaff. "No killing," he hissed of Aveline, "not unless forced." She nodded, stepped. "Forward, drop your guns." Her voice rang across yard like forged brass. Perhaps it was the steadiness in her stance. Perhaps the mob gathering. Perhaps plain arithmetic. 9 Pinkertons against 50 furious freighters. One by one rifles clattered to dust. Caldwell backed toward gate, only to meet Jory Weeks and Deputy Bramley blocking exit. Council clerk in tow clutching manifest duplicates like holy writ. "Mayor Caldwell," the clerk announced, voice surprisingly firm. "By unanimous emergency vote, the council suspends you from office pending inquiry into misappropriation of town reserves." Gasps. Caldwell's eyes bulged. "You have no authority?" Bramley finished. He unsnapped badge, offered it to Aveline instead. "Authority is earned." She shook her head. "Keep it for now. But the town decides who wears it." Harlan appeared, gripping Caldwell's shoulders. "Jail's ready." Rain began again, gentle cleansing. Elias collected rifles, handing them to deputies now loyal to people rather than purse. Pinkertons, disarmed, accepted escort to outbound stage. Aveline stood amid shifting scene, breath streaming white under sudden cool. Hunger replaced by something fierce, tender, unstoppable. Elias joined her, cleaning blood from lip with sleeve. "You all right?" she asked. "I will be." He studied her, rifle lowered yet steady, chin lifted, eyes alight with purpose. Grayridge's spine just straightened. Footsteps approached. Mrs. Temper, children, merchants all converging. Voices overlapping, thanks, apologies, vows. To share harvest, to rebuild. Someone thrust a corncob torch skyward, bright even under gray. Cheers erupted. In that roar, Aveline felt chains vaporize into memory. But celebration faltered when a scout galloped from South Road, horse lathered. "Riders 40, maybe more heading fast," he shouted, voice hitching with terror. "Not Pinkerton's bandits. From the borderlands. Caldwell hired them weeks ago as insurance. They're hours out-armed for siege." Elation curdled to dread. Faces turned to Elias, to Aveline, to council clerk clutching evidence like brittle glass. Aveline tightened grip on rifle. Elias's hand found hers, squeezing once. "We've won one battle," he murmured, gaze fixed on looming horizon where dust plumes smoked. "Now we decide if Grey Ridge keeps the dawn." The storm of hired guns approached, horizon darkening anew. And in the freight yard, a newly kindled rebellion braced for fire they had sparked but had yet to survive. They stood at the freight yard's broken fence as the dust plume thickened on the southern road, watching the horizon bruise itself purple beneath the weight of incoming riders. Aveline, Caro's pulse beat like a mallet against her eardrums. All morning she had felt light-footed, as though the earth itself buoyed her every stride, proof that hunger no longer shackled her spirit. Now that borrowed lightness curdled into a tremor she refused to show. She flexed her sore fingers around the walnut stock of the borrowed Winchester and made herself breathe, counting heartbeats the way her mother once counted stitches. Asterisk in, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Asterisk around her the yard seethed with frantic industry. Harlan and Helena Dake marshaled farmhands to erect a barricade of grain sacks along the rail spur. Jory Weeks darted between groups, delivering nails, lamp oil, and whispered encouragements. Deputy Bramley badge still pinned, but shirt sleeves rolled past scorched forearms, sketched a hasty map of Grey Ridge in the dirt, assigning lookout posts and fallback points. And at the center of that whirling constellation stood Elias Quinn, every order he gave measured and calm, like a carpenter sighting boards before the first saw stroke. Aveline watched him, feeling the steadying gravity of his composure tug at the chaos inside her chest. The Farmstead shirt he had loaned her last night still hung from her shoulders, damp now with sweat and drizzle. Mud streaked his trousers, rainwater dripped from the tip of his nose, yet he moved with the unhurried certainty of a man transplanting. Seedlings aware storms might come, but trusting the soil beneath his boots. A runner skidded to a halt at Elias's side. "Scouts say 43 riders confirmed," the boy panted. "All armed, 2 wagons trailing maybe ammo." Elias drew a slow breath. ETA, less than an hour. That set the yard buzzing anew, voices raised, tools clanging. Aveline stepped forward. "We need more than sack walls," she said, pitching her voice for those nearest to hear. "We need resolve." Eyes turned her way, farmhands old enough to be her father, merchants who had once refused to extend her credit, brash drovers who yesterday would not have paused to learn her name. Resolve, the word felt fragile on her tongue. Yet it hung in the wet air, catching like a burr in every mind. Elias met her gaze, offered the barest nod. She swallowed. "Some of you fought in the border skirmishes," she continued, recalling stories overheard in Grey Ridge's taproom. "You know what fear does when hooves thunder your way. But you also know numbers can lie, because one clear purpose cuts deeper than 10 dull blades." She lifted the rifle so the crowd could see the chipped stock, the scar across the receiver where a bullet had glanced. "I was tied to a post 4 days, waiting for hunger to grind me down. It almost did. But you all stepped in, risked badge, business, and bone to pull me free. So I'm done letting fear make choices for me. If Caldwell's mercenaries want to break Grey Ridge, they will have to walk through that purpose. Through us." A murmur rolled across the yard. Not a cheer, something lower, weightier, like granite settling into place. A man near the rail lifted his hammer. A washerwoman raised her scrubbing paddle. One by one, tools became declarations. Helena. Clap dusty hands. Then let's sharpen purpose. Sandowski, bring that keg o' nails. Bramley, get me lantern wicks, we'll make torches along the barricade. Orders crackled like kindling catching flame. Elias moved to Aveline's side as workers dispersed. "Spoken like someone who's been leading folks her whole life," he said under his breath. She barked a shaky laugh. "I've spent most of my life invisible." "Not anymore," he replied. The look he gave her equal parts pride and worry rooted in her chest like a banner stake. Greyridge itself prepared like a hive before a storm. The council, now minus Caldwell, currently secured in the sheriff's cell, authorized the ringing of the convocation bell, a relic from the old mission church. Its iron throat tolled across rooftops, summoning every able hand. Shop shutters were nailed. Livestock herded behind stone walls. Children shepherded into the schoolhouse cellar where teacher Miss Gable doled out boiled sweets and steady songs. From the rail yard, Aveline watched families cross the street carrying blankets and rifles alike. Each face told a story, fear tracing. Crow's feet around a mother's eyes, determination carving lines beside a carpenter's mouth, fury painting twin flags across a tanner's cheeks. If legends sprouted from ordinary souls thrust into extraordinary straits, a forest bloomed in Greyridge that afternoon. Atop the depot roof, Harlan positioned 3 marksman old miners with muskets older, still but eyes sharp as tack points. They would aim to maim, not kill, yet even the threat of powder might slow a charge. On the ground, Hellinga orchestrated wagon placement, 2 flatbeds cross, parked to choke the main road. Tailgates removed to form ramparts. Grain sacks stacked 3 high would absorb most lead, she claimed, and whatever spilled could feed the wounded after. Branley deputized 8 volunteers, handing out star badges etched hastily from barn tin. One he pinned over Aveline's borrowed shirt. "Deputy Caro," he said, voice gentle in contrast to hammering rain. "Symbol matters." She traced the crude 5-pointed star, its edges sharp against cloth. Once the badge had represented the hand that chained her to the stockade. Now it weighed differently heavier, yet strangely kinder. Elias emerged from the depot office clutching a folded telegraph slip. He signaled Branley and Aveline to follow into the lee of a boxcar. "Just got word to Fort Trenton," he said. Explained Caldwell's arrest, Pinkerton's disarmed, mercenaries inbound. Captain Harrow's dispatching cavalry, but 2 days out. Aveline's stomach dropped. 2 days might as well be 2 months. "We hold that long?" "Have to," Bramley muttered, wiping wet hair from his brow. "But 40 men on horseback is no joke. They'll test our line hard." Elias's jaw clenched. "Then we make the first hour costlier than their coin purse allows." They settled into waiting as clouds shredded to narrow tatters, letting shafts of swollen sun spear through. Heat steamed off puddles. Somewhere a lark dared a song and fell silent. Aveline knelt behind the barricade, fingers worrying the lever of her rifle. She scanned the field south of town, rolling grassland split by the hard-packed trade road, visibility close to a mile before the first rise. Already dust columns etched gray-brown spirals against pearl sky. She imagined the sound of hooves, a distant drum roll, yet wind carried only the rustle of corn and the squeal of drying axle grease. Elias crouched beside her, resting his own carbine across grain sacks. Sweat glimmered at his temple despite the breeze. "How's your shoulder?" he asked, the sunburn lines from her stockade ordeal still smarted. "Stiff," she admitted, "but I can cycle this lever." To prove it, she racked around with crisp authority. The metallic snick-chack felt like punctuation. Voices whispered down the barricade nervous prayers, jokes floating like thin soap bubbles, fragments of hymn. Time stretched and sagged, elastic with dread. Aveline felt minutes crawl across her skin, tickling like ants. Then the horizon shifted, first a flicker, sun glancing off moving metal, then a low, rolling murmur, darker than wind. Finally shapes, rider silhouettes, cresting a distant swell, coalescing into a ragged line that grew as it drew near until individual horses, rifles, and wide-brimmed hats resolved in the shimmer. 2 wagons trundled behind, each pulled by 4 mules. Flags hung from wagon rails, black cloth emblazoned with a red serpent swallowing its tail. Borderland oathbreakers, Harlan muttered beside her, recognition sour. Smugglers turned. Hired blades. Aveline's throat tightened. Oathbreakers were infamous along the frontier. Veterans of no war, but their own greed. Men who traded loyalty by the barrel. Stories told of settlements burned when payments lapsed, of children sold to mining camps. Caldwell's desperation ran deeper than even she had guessed. Elias lifted a field glass Bramley had borrowed from the surveyor's office. He scanned. The column. I count 41 riders, 2 on each wagon, driver plus guard. Carbines, scatterguns, half still wearing cavalry coats they've seen action. Can we parley? Aveline asked, though bile curdled the thought. Maybe after we show backbone. Elias replied. He raised his arm signal for the rooftop lookouts to ready. Harlan's miners shifted bridles on ancient muskets. Helena downline tightened reins on the blockade wagons. Bramley paced between positions, offering last-minute instruction with a wordless squeeze to forearms. Aveline's heartbeat slowed, each thump landing heavy but determined. She found herself recalling moments in the stockade sun hammering. Her eyelids, thirst-blistering tongue, and felt something flint-hard crystallize. Never again. The mercenary column halted 100 yards out, just beyond optimal rifle range. Dust settled around them like burnt sugar. Their captain rode. Forward alone, reins dangling loose to show control. He was tall, broad-hipped, yellow hair cropped military short. His coat of faded Union blue, stripped of insignia, save 2 silver serpent pins. He carried a Spencer repeater across his pommel, barrel glinting with custom etch. Town of Grey Ridge. His voice boomed, honed by years barking orders across battle lines. I am Captain Ransom Pike, contracted legal agent of Mayor Ruark Caldwell. A rumble of anger swept the barricade Caldwell's name like sour milk on tongues. Bramley stepped onto an upturned crate behind the sacks, badge shining. Caldwell sits in jail on council warrant, he shouted back. Your contract's void. Captain Pike laughed, deep and sharp. My contract is with Caldwell's gold, not his seat. And gold still spends. You've one chance: turn over the prisoner, disband your rabble, and pay indemnity of 500 bushels. Refuse, and we take payment in blood and property. Ah! Low hiss escaped between Aveline's teeth. Elias's jaw tightened. Bramley raised both hands for attention. Grey Ridge owes nothing to thieves, he declared. Turn around. No one needs die. Pike's smile chilled. Fine, blood. It is. He wheeled his horse, raising an arm. Aveline barely had time to duck before the first volley shrieked overhead, dozen rifles loosing in concert. Splinters leapt from wagon sides. A lantern exploded behind her in shower of glass. Screams from the line, but none fatal. Return fire crackled. Musket reports from rooftop, carbines from ground. Aveline sighted a rider leveling sharps at Helena and squeezed a crack. A kick, horse reared, rifle flew. She cycled the lever, the rhythm strangely soothing. The mercenaries advanced at a trot, firing alternately. Grain sacks thumped as bullets thudded into wheat kernels. Aveline kept low, watching Elias reload with disciplined calm. She saw Bramley drag a wounded teen shot through calf behind cover. Blood glittered like pomegranate seeds. 50 yards. Pike barked an order. Half. The riders peeled right, angling toward an alley to flank. South side, someone shouted. Jory sprinted with 2 men to shore that gap, laying down boards as Adbach barricade. Aveline's shoulder burned with old sun blisters, but she ignored it, firing again, catching a horse spine, unseating its rider. She hated hurting the beast, but necessity left no gentler shot. Suddenly, thunder of hooves behind. She spun to find 4 riders vaulting the freight fence where pickets lay weak. They'd found a blind spot. One swung a lariat, aiming to yank. A marksman from the roof. Aveline shouted warning, dashed forward, empty rifle clattering as she drew Bramley's spare Colt. The pistol roared, bucking savagely. Rope went slack as horse plunged, rider clutching shoulder. Another advanced, brandishing a cavalry saber relic but lethal. She backpedaled, stumbling over spilled wheat. Blade arced silver toward her face. A shovel handle intercepted Elias, driving it like a lance. Steel rang wood, saber deflected wide. Elias reversed grip, pummel smacking rider's temple man toppled. The third attacker leveled a shotgun at Elias's belly. Aveline lunged, slamming into Elias's side. Twin blasts boomed, pellets whistled inches above corn sacks. Before gun could re-rack, Harlan's musket barked from the roof. The shotgunner sprawled. Fourth rider wheeled, fleeing back over fence. Elias exhaled, turning to Aveline. "Saved my hide." She tried to answer, but breath came in ragged heaves. Adrenaline tasted metallic on her tongue. She reloaded shaking pistol chambers with cartridges fished from belt loops, noise to North Firecatch and Haystack. Sparks leapt, fed by wind. Helena shouted for bucket line. Two women ran, dresses dark with soot. Aveline's mind split fight here, fire there, but they had enough hands. Trust. She refocused south. Mercenaries regrouped at 30 yards, casualties littering approach. Yet their numbers still dwarfed Grey Ridge's defenders. Pike dismounted, eyes smoldering. He produced a small brass whistle, blew a sharp trill. From the wagon beds, tar-smeared rockets rose signal flares arching over town, bursts of crimson fire painting clouds. "What's that mean?" Aveline yelled. "Raid." "Order," Elias answered grimly. "They'll split, hit houses, burn stores, draw us thin." He was right. Groups of 3 to 5 riders broke formation, galloping toward side streets, carbines spitting at windows to drive settlers inside. Flames licked a porch roof. A woman's scream knotted Aveline's stomach. Strategy no longer about barricade. Now it was about the whole town. Bramley sprinted over. "We can't hold all fronts." Elias's eyes darted map, pieces aligning. Pull back street by street. Canal them toward square where numbers equalize. "But houses," Aveline protested. "Material can burn, lives can't," he said. "We'll douse what we can, but if we scatter, we fall." Aveline hated the logic yet saw truth. She blew the retreat whistle Helena had fashioned from copper tubing. Defenders began a fighting withdrawal, leapfrogging cover, roof marksmen descending to second lines, freighters dragging sacks to choke alleys. Fires flared 3 rooftops, 2 wagons, but rain clouds loomed again, rumbling promise of aid. Aveline found herself leading a squad of teenagers, Jory Weeks. 2 ranch hands, Miss Gable's older nephew, through the smithy lane, shooting out lanterns the mercenaries tried to use for arson. Smoke-stung eyes, tears mixing with sweat. Pistols cracked, horses screamed. Anvil clang echoed as if the town forge rang war bells. At the crossroads, by the church, the defenders formed a semicircle around the stone well. Families sheltered behind pews dragged outdoors. Pike's riders converged, frustrated by choke points, still outnumbering but now funneled. Wind carried cold droplets, first stray heralds of another storm. Aveline knelt behind the well's parapet, sharing cartridges with Miss Temper, whose broom handle now wore a bayonet scavenged from a broken rifle. The old woman winked, as though sweeping dust and fending off marauders were differences of degree, not kind. Across the square Pike strode, meeting Elias and Bramley halfway between lines. Flag of truce, improvised from white feed sack. Rain began in earnest, drumming on tin awnings. Aveline strained to hear their words. "My men tire of this," Pike growled, audible even through downpour. "Give me Caldwell and we ride out." Elias shook his head. He faces trial by his peers. Pike smirked. "Peers? Starving farmers and Tin Star teachers? I'll pry him loose either way, just means more widows." Bramley's hand hovered near holstered sidearm. "You try, you die." Pike's laugh was thunder deep. Maybe, but I'm paid double if you kill me. Men under me become lieutenants and take your granaries as bonus. Aveline felt icicles crawl her spine. A no-win gambit. Kill Pike, his men rampage. Spare him, he returns. Yet something in Elias's posture shifted, an idea unfurling. You want Caldwell? Elias asked, voice low but steady. Rain plastered his hair, rivulets tracing jawline. Then let the man decide his own fate, Pike cocked brow. Meaning? Trial by champion, Elias proposed. Stunned silence rippled. Your grievance is contract. Our grievance is theft. One duel your best versus ours. Winner determines custody of Caldwell and your payment. Pike scoffed. Old world nonsense. Less nonsense than burning every house for coins you might never collect, Elias countered. You lose men each minute. Your purse bleeds. Duel ends it quick, no widows, no barns torched. Aveline's gut twisted. A duel? Against Pike's best? Who? Elias himself. Fear flared. He was skilled, but she'd seen borderland duelists draw like striking vipers. Pike studied him, calculating. Terms? Public square. Second midday bell tomorrow. Pistols. At 10 paces. Aveline merely blurted objection, giving them a whole night to regroup. But Elias's eyes flicked to hers, and she read the unspoken plan. Time to outwit rather than outshoot. Pike spat rainwater, grinned. Fine. My second. We'll verify weapons. He extended a leather-gloved hand. Elias clasped it. Deal struck. The tension broke like a bowed plank. Pike mounted, whistled. Mercenaries disengaged, pulling wounded, gathering fires under tarps. They formed camp on the South Commons, a mere quarter-mile out, close enough to threaten, far enough to respect. Parley. Greyridge exhaled ragged relief. Smoke still curled from blackened eaves, but rain helped quench flames. 2 defenders lay dead, 1 miner, 1 ranch hand, and a dozen injured, yet most breathed. Families emerged, counting blessings and broken shutters. In the council hall, once Caldwell's private parlor, survivors gathered to triage needs. Aveline hovered at doorway until Elias beckoned. Inside, lamplight flickered, overworried. Faces. Bramley briefed. 7 hours until duel. Either we beat Pike's best or fight again. His gaze landed on Elias. You volunteered yourself. Elias shook his head. I volunteered a figure, not necessarily me, murmurs. Helena. Crossed arms. Who else matches Pike's killers? Jory cleared throat. We got maybe 3 men can draw straight, none as fast. Elias turned toward Aveline. Her heart slammed. No, she whispered. The room quieted. He spoke gently. Your aim today saved lives. Your story already rallied town. Pike won't see you coming. Aveline's cheeks flamed. Memories, corn stolen, stockade, hunger, duel at 10 paces. She had fired rifles from rest, yes, but pistols at duel distance under watchful eyes? Terror roared. Bramley opened mouth. Closed it. He looked at Aveline, apology and admiration tangled. She chooses, not us. Aveline stepped back, lungs tight. Rain hammered tin roof like a ticking metronome. Every face waited. Fear kept me silent too long, she heard herself say, voice steadier than expectation. It chained every hungry child to Caldwell's mercy. If I step aside, I teach Greyridge to shrink again. I won't. Elias's shoulders lowered with pride and sorrow. We trained then. Night draped the town in damp velvet. At the freight yard, Elias set lanterns at 10 pace marks, their glow casting twin islands of light. He handed Aveline Bramley's Colt-oiled, loaded with precision rounds. Focus on breath, he instructed. On count of 3, step, turn, fire. Don't rush the draw, smooth outruns fast. Dozens of times she practiced. Muscles memorized motions. Thumb unsnapping hammer strap, fingers curling grip, elbow tucking, barrel lifting. Rainwater-soaked sleeves. Lantern wick sputtered. Each shot cracked silence, bullets punching straw target pinned to crate. At first she missed, then grazed edges. Then center. Elias said nothing, only repositioned her shoulders. Smoothed tension from wrists. Between volleys they reloaded slow. Ritual honing focus. Aveline asked, what if Pike sends his own hand? Some legend? Legends bleed, Elias answered. And you've bled enough to know pain doesn't own you. She swallowed. If I fall, then we fight like hell. His certainty molten. But you won't. Hours slipped. Fingers blistered, ears rang, hearts cinched. Finally Elias lowered her gun. Enough. Rest matters more now. They walked side by side toward church annex where cots for wounded lined pews. Stars winked between tattered clouds. The air smelled of wet pine and cordite. At the annex door, Aveline paused. Lantern inside bathed Elias's face in soft amber lines. Of fatigue etched deep, she touched his hand. Why trust me with everyone's fate? He brushed damp hair from her brow. Because the first time I saw you, starving on that post, you still looked the mayor in the eye. Courage isn't absence of fear. It's refusing to let fear dictate manners. Her chest tightened, not grief, not terror, something tender and blazing. She squeezed his fingers once, then stepped inside. Dawn arrived pale, dripping cold light through window panes. Aveline dreamed of cornfields, all golden tassels bowed in reverence, until Bramley's gentle shake woke her. It's time, he said. He pressed a small parcel into her palm, a strip of crimson cloth. Miners call it a daunt band. Tied round wrist to remind heart what it beats for. She wrapped it tight, blood thrumming beneath. Outside, gray mist hugged street. Townsfolk lined route to square, muted voices offering bread morsels, pats on shoulders. Children extended paper flowers folded from lesson scraps. Aveline tucked one behind her era purple lilac dot in the square. 2 barrels marked the duel. Ground. Captain Pike stood flanked by his lieutenant, a wiry man named Vetch, eyes like frostbite. Vetch would be the shooter. Rumors said he could snuff a candle at 30 yards. Vetch's pistol, inspected by Bramley and Helena, met duel. Fairness no modified sights, standard load. Aveline faced him at noon bell's first toll. Rain held off, though clouds crowded. Wind carried smell of burnt timber and fresh bread alike. Bramley read terms. 10 paces on command. Turn and fire once. If neither falls, reload and fire until one cannot continue. Vetch smirked, tapping holster. Ladies first, he rasped. Aveline's heart slowed, each stroke deep and deliberate. She saw Jory's bandaged arm raised in salute, Mrs. Temper's broom planted like a standard. Elias's gray eyes locked on her. Purpose. She tasted it stronger than fear, hotter. Then steel. Begin, Bramley called. They walked heel to toe. Each step thudded inside her head louder than church bell. 1, 2, 10, turn. She pivoted motion fluid, not hurried thumb flick, draw, sights align. A heartbeat stretched. Vetch's barrel glimmered, his lips curled. She exhaled and squeezed. Recoil jarred shoulder. Smoke blossomed blue-white. She smelled burnt. Salt patter dot across the space. Vetch staggered, blood blooming at collarbone, yet his finger convulsed. Pistol roared wild, slug whizzing past her left ear like hornet. He dropped to one knee, shock washing color from face. Gasps erupted. Bramley rushed, arm raised to check. Vetch clutched wound, eyes wide but conscious. Duel not done. He could still fire. Aveline broke open cylinder, hands steady, feeding cartridge while Vetch fumbled for reload. Pike shouted encouragement, fury shadowing features. She snapped cylinder shut, cocked hammer. Vetch lifted gun with trembling hand. Lightning flashed not from sky, but from memory of stockade sun and Elias's shovel intercepting saber swing. Years of invisibility crystallized into a line drawn here. Vetch squeezed first shot kicked dust near her boot. She answered. Her bullet struck center mass just below sternum. Vetch's eyes went glassy. Gun fell. He collapsed sideways, breath hitching. Duel done. Silence as absolute as snowfall blanketed square. Then a roar undefinable mix of relief, awe, triumph rose, echoing off courthouse stones. Mrs. Temper wept openly. Jory whooped, clutching wounded arm. Aveline stood unmoving as if rooted. Smoke curled from barrel, drifting like incense. She had never killed or meant to, but the line between intention and outcome blurred in that ringing. Hush! She whispered a prayer for Vetch's pain, even as part of her exhaled a lifetime of oppression. Branley lifted her uninjured arm. Voice hoarse, Greridge's champion, cheers pealed. Elias reached her first, hands cradling her face, forehead, resting to hers. She felt his shudder of relief dot across the square. Pike's jaw flexed. He stepped forward, raging, but mercenaries behind him shifted, uneasy. Contracts seldom covered death in fair duel. Money turned hollow when spilled guts glistened on cobbles. Still, Pike pulled revolver. Contract lives while I breathe. He snarled. Aveline raised her pistol, barrel steady. Then exhale, Captain. Branley, Helena, Harlan, half a dozen rifles aligned on Pike. Rain began again, drumming poignancy. The mercenary's eyes flicked left, right, calculating odds. Now grim. He holstered weapons slowly, lifted empty hands. Helena advanced to shackle him. His men, leaderless, dropped arms one by one. Some even knelt beside wounded townsfolk to help staunch bleeding, as if witnessing that duel crack something hard. In them, Aveline finally lowered pistol. Exhaustion flooded limbs, trembling like struck wheat stalks. Elias guided her to Wells' stone rim, sitting until dizziness passed. Around them, Greyridge breathed again. Survivors embraced. Council. Clerk sealed Pike's surrender. Children emerged, eyes wide. Rain washed blood from cobbles into thirsty earth. Elias pressed a canteen to her lips. Water tasted of iron barrel and new dawn. You did it, he whispered. She swallowed. We did. He shook his head. You drew the line. A rumble knot. Thunder this time rolled from North Road. Cavalry dragoons from Fort Trenton arrived at full gallop, banners snapping, rifles polished. Too late for battle, right on time for order. Major Harrow dismounted. Taking in scene, the smoking roofs, the bound mercenaries, the young woman with red cloth around wrist and spent pistol in lap. Understanding flickered. He saluted Aveline. First, ma'am, he said solemnly, looks like you've saved us paperwork. Laughter bubbled, fragile but bright, yet as townsfolk turned to mending wounds and counting grain, a shadow lingered in Aveline's mind. For all Pikes. Threat, Caldwell still awaited trial, his influence perhaps deeper than they knew. And beyond Greyridge stretched counties where other Caldwells hoarded power like spoiling corn. She rose, legs steadier, eyes scanning smoke-draped rooftops, broken yet unbowed. Greyridge had kept the dawn, but the day was long, and new battles. BRE. She looked at Elias. He followed her gaze beyond town limits where prairie rolled under restless sky. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing, the red daunt band between their palms. Storms past, he murmured. For now, she countered, voice calm as simmering coals. But the horizon's wide, he squeezed gently. Then we plant more than corn. She smiled a curve, fierce and tender. Around them, bells tolled for midday mass. Cavalry dismounted to take statements. Children chased puddle ripples. And above, clouds parted revealing a blaze of blue unmarred, as if sky itself inhaled hope. But hope, like any seed, demanded tending, and an east wind already whispered of distant fires. That evening, with mercenaries bound for Fort Trenton escort and Caldwell transferred under cavalry guard, Greyridge's council convened in the open square. Lanterns ringed the platform. Townsfolk crowded shoulder to shoulder, faces lit golden. Bramley stepped forward, clutching parchment. "Old Charter states vacancies filled by public acclamation," he announced. "We need interim mayor until formal election." Eyes drifted to Elias, the natural choice. Yet he shook his head. Turning toward Aveline. Murmurs swelled astonishment, excitement. Aveline's pulse fluttered. Leadership meant paperwork, negotiations, the endless grind of balancing scarcity. Could she trade rifle for quill? But before she could protest, hoofbeats clattered. A single rider tore up Main Street, coat ripped, face streaked with soot. He reined hard before platform, voice ragged. Train from Junction City derailed. 10 miles east, cargo tank of oil burst fire, racing toward Wheatbelt. Need all pumps, buckets, hands. Gasps. Wheatbelt fed 3 counties, harvest weeks away. Fire now would starve thousands. Aveline felt exhaustion peel away, replaced by grim resolve. She climbed platform steps, addressing crowd. "We saved our town today. Now we save our neighbors." She pointed south where water towers stood. "Load every barrel, hitch every horse. The prairie hasn't had her fill yet." And just like that, council postponed, deputations formed. Grey Ridge's defenders mounted wagons, cavalry lending canteens. Elias swung into saddle beside her. Eyes creased with weary pride. As convoy rumbled out beneath star-flecked sky. Aveline glanced back once at the stockade post where she'd hung days earlier, now toppled to kindling. She nodded, silent vow forged. Wind caught her hair, carrying scent of scorched oats and distant smoke. Ahead, a red glow licked horizon. The night's work was far from done, and Grey Ridge, the town forgotten by time, rode to meet the new. Fire, determined that no hunger, no tyrant, no flame would starve a single soul under their watch again. Again the prairie rolled beneath wagon wheels, but this time the rhythm of the convoy felt different, less like flight, more like a heartbeat pushing blood toward a wound in distant flesh. The column stretched nearly a quarter mile. 4 water wagons sloshing dark silhouettes in moon-washed light. 5 hay carts repurposed to carry shovels, blankets, and terrified collie dogs that refused to be left behind. A dozen riders ranging ahead to scout fire lines. And at its center the council carriage, once Caldwell's gilded symbol of superiority, now a plain buckboard draped in damp tarps, its brass fittings hacked away lest they catch a spark. Aveline sat on its high bench, reins in gloved hands. Elias perched beside her. The 2 lead horses, massive Percherons named. Bessie and Tun snorted clouds that glittered like silver dust under starlight. The road cut east through switchgrass, then threaded between twin ridges where the air began to smell faintly of kerosene and scorched earth. Somewhere beyond those hills, the derailed freight car bled flaming oil into a parched wheat belt. Aveline flicked reins gently, urging the team onward. She had not slept since the duel, and fatigue lapped her thoughts like waves, but urgency kept her spine straight. Beside her, Elias consulted a hand-drawn map Bramley had sketched from memory of the railroad grade. His free hand rested lightly on the stock of his carbine, holstered in a leather cradle bolted to the seat. 3 more miles to the trestle crossing, he said quietly, voice drowsy but firm. From there the grade slopes into the lower valley. If the tanker burst on the downslope, runoff will pour straight into the wheat. Aveline pictured molten oil cascading through dry stalks, igniting a sea of amber into midnight glass. What if we dig containment trenches? She asked. Elias nodded. We'll need every shovel and enough bodies to keep relays going. The cavalry can ride ahead, start axes on firebreak lines. She guided Bessie around a pothole large enough to swallow a wheel. Behind them, lanterns bobbed along the convoy like anemones. Rain clouds massed again in the west, but the wind pushed opposite. Time would not wait for sky mercy. They crested the ridge just as dawn's first ember smeared the horizon. The scene below halted every tongue. A river of fire 2 miles long crawled through wheat fields, licking gold to ash. Black smoke mushrooms towered, swirling embers lofted high, fell like burning snow onto unlit rows. The tanker still lay on its side against shattered rails, steel plates crumpled. Flames belched from a ruptured seam, roaring with the voice of a forge-given monstrous lungs. Major Harrow rode up, reining his chestnut beside the buckboard. Soot streaked his uniform. He'd galloped ahead with scouts. "Spill's worse than we thought," he reported. "Stream bed below is aflame. If wind shifts north, Gredridge's corn could go next." Aveline felt the deck tilt under the weight of that possibility. They hadn't just come to save neighbors. They'd come to keep survival itself from turning to smoke. Harrow continued. "We've got 30 cavalry boots plus 20 farmhands from Junction South Side. Rail engineers believe we can divert flow if we dam the culvert before it hits the river fork." Elias scanned terrain. "Good soil there, but we need earth movers. Got 2 steam tractors due by rail if tracks weren't twisted." Harrow grimaced. Aveline's gaze caught a battered telegraph line sagging along the grade. "Signal still up?" "Uncertain," Harrow said. "Poles near wreck burned." Elias tapped map. "There's an abandoned quarry half-mile north. Limestone rubble could plug gaps. We form bucket brigades from wagons to douse ember showers. Dig trenches at wheat edges, haul stone to culvert." Aveline saw the plan bloom in Harrow's eyes. "I'll split my troops, 15 to quarry, 10 to cut line around unlit perimeter, 5 to secure locals." Elias dismounted, gave Aveline a quick squeeze on her forearm, where the red dot band still glowed vivid, and strode away, barking assignments. She watched him vanish into smoke swirl, heart twisting. The world kept inventing new crucibles. For the farmer who once offered her 2 stolen cobs of corn, by mid-morning they labored inside a furnace. Heat hammered skin raw, the roar drowned thought. Aveline shoveled ditch walls in a relay chain, passing clods to children who had insisted on helping. Her blistered palms opened twice. She wrapped them in torn skirt hem, kept digging. At intervals Branley staggered by, distributing ladles of thin broth cooked in a field cauldron grain, salvaged from Caldwell's private store now, fueling bodies that fought to preserve grain for strangers. Steam tractors finally rumbled over the keel. Damaged track, hauled by cavalry and a team of mules. Engineers steered them into position near the culvert, boilers hissing. With groans of stressed metal, they tilted buckets, dumping load after load of sodden earth and limestone. Water from the first freight wagons filled at Grey Ridges. Towers splashed down to cool, fiery rivulets cresting the trench walls. Every 15 minutes, a lookout perched atop the grain elevator would ring a cowbell, signaling wind shifts. Each shift triggered repositioning of damping crews, hoisting wet tarps, smothering airborne cinders with flour sacks soaked in river water. Hours blurred. Once Aveline collapsed to knees, lungs searing from smoke. Blue dots danced before her. Eyes, but a little girl no older than 7, face streaked with ash pressed a canteen to her lips. "Mama says heroes drink," the child lisped. Aveline gulped, coughed, forced to her feet by that simple faith. By late afternoon, the tide of fire slowed at the ditch line, starved of fresh fuel. Yet embers still threatened. As dusk painted clouds violet, Major Harrow rode through the trenches, delivering news. Contained east flank, but south slope still feeding else. "We hold till rain or nothing left to burn." At his words thunder muttered. Aveline craned her head. Distant towers of cumulonimbus backlit by sunset. If storms move north before midnight. She dared not finish. Rain could save everything. Or gusts could whip cinders beyond trenches. Elias emerged from quarry team half hidden in dust, shirt torn, forearms ridged with bruises. "Stone wall holds," he reported to Harrow. He turned to Aveline, eyes searching. She tried to smile. Only soot-cracked Dot. He lifted canteen to her mouth. Water warm, but divine. Council wants update, he said softly. They're regrouped by tanker, planning salvage. Go, she whispered hoarsely. I can dig, he shook head. You. 8 less than me. 5 minutes rest. She almost argued, then felt knees tremble. She followed him to a charred oak where ground still cooled. They sat against brittle bark, shoulders touching, silent as darkness seeped. Crickets buzzed at edges of chaos, brave survivors singing defiance. Aveline closed eyes a moment, felt. Elias's hand cradled hers. Seeing you out there, he murmured, I kept thinking, maybe this is how towns get born again, not from councils, but from one hungry girl refusing to vanish. Emotion lodged in her throat. She squeezed his fingers until pain blurred. And one farmer who decided corn belongs to everyone. They leaned foreheads, exhaustion knitting them. The moment tasted like unsaid promises. A shout shattered. Respite, wind shift, southwest, bell clanged urgent. Flames leapt new angles as gusts whipped valleys. Elias and Aveline sprang up, bolting to lines. Hours passed in frantic relocation. At midnight, lightning stitched sky. Thunder cracked. Then rain. First fat drops hissed on embers, steam erupting in ghostly columns. Volunteers cheered raggedly. Rain intensified to sheet. Flames coughed, shriveled, died to glowing husks. Aveline tipped her face, mouth open, letting heaven's water cleanse salt and ash. Tears joined rain. Nearby, Elias's laugh broke into a hoarse sob. He hugged Harlan, who wheezed curses of joy. Morning sun rose on a blackened scar, but destruction halted miles short of the western wheat belt. Survivors tottered among smoking stubble, counting saved acreage. Engineers doused tanker wrecks, last licking tongues. Doctors tended burns with salve brewed from comfrey and lard. Aveline helped stack charred ties, her muscles beyond pain, existing in a state of half-dream. She had not slept in nearly 2 days. Yet something deeper than fatigue hummed like. Seeds under soil sensing spring. Near noon. As crews cleared lines, Major Harrow approached with a folded telegram. Face sober. Word from Capitol. Caldwell petitioned for federal marshal transport. Claims wrongful imprisonment. Aveline tasted bitterness. What does the marshal court say? They'll review. Could arrive next week. Elias joined them, overhearing, his jaw set. He'll twist facts, paint us insurgents. Evidence of granary theft stands, Aveline argued. Evidence can be buried. Harrow said quietly, especially if Caldwell's investors lean on judges. Elias met Aveline's gaze, unspoken understanding of power's long reach. Then we build a truth too loud to bury. 3 days later, Grey Ridge buzzed with recovery. Fields smoldered down to nutrient-rich charcoal. Farmers saw hope in black soil. The council scheduled open forum on courthouse steps. Caleb Reed, a rancher once silent under Caldwell's taxes, now spoke of cooperative grain banks. Helena proposed a writers' network to alert towns of disasters. Jory introduced literacy circles so children could read ledgers their elders signed. But Aveline noticed tension coiled under progress. Caldwell, though caged, still commanded whispers. Pinkerton lawyers circulated. Merchants who had prospered from Caldwell's favoritism muttered of lost profits. On the 4th evening, while Aveline and Elias repaired schoolhouse shutters, a writer pounded up one of Harrow's scouts. Telegram for Miss Carroll, he said, handing envelope. Aveline's brow furrowed. Few knew her full name. She slit paper. A single line typed in brusque capitals. Come to Riverside Park at moonrise or children pay price. Serpent. Her. Blood iced. Serpent, the red serpent emblem of Pike's mercenaries. But Pike languished in Trenton Stockade. Who then? She showed Elias, his face drained. Could be bluff. Can't risk. They called a quick council. Branley argued for armed escort. Harrow suggested a sting, but Aveline felt weight. Of message, they targeted her specifically. Hero of duel, face of rebellion. If she cowered behind escorts, fear might creep back into townsfolk. But alone was folly. Finally Helena proposed compromise. Discreet overwatch hidden round park. Elias insisted on accompanying Aveline as visible partner. Moon rose half-circle over cottonwoods as they entered Riverside Park, a patch of grass along Whisper Fork. Lanterns hung on posts. Children often fished gray there. Tonight silence. Rain. They waited near gazebo. Shadows pooled under willows. Frogs croaked. Aveline's pulse ticked. Suddenly, a figure stepped from gloom, slim, gloved, wearing traveling cloak and bowler hat, hands raised. No visible weapon. Miss Carrow, a woman's voice smooth like oiled brass. And Mr. Quinn, I apologize for theatrics, but urgency required. Aveline narrowed eyes. Serpent? The woman chuckled. Symbol recognizable, yes. But we are no longer bound to Pike. Some of us reevaluate loyalties. Elias shifted. Speak plain. She stepped closer into Moonbeam. High cheekbones, streak of ash on temple, eyes sharp green. Name's Marin Holt, former quartermaster for Oathbreakers. Pike hired us, Caldwell paid. But Caldwell shorted final installment. When Pike fell, Caldwell disavowed, left us to military court. Some were hanged, others like me escaped. Aveline sensed half-truth. Why contact me? Marin glanced at River. Because Caldwell's lawyers petitioned martial court with doctored logs, claiming Pike's attack was unauthorized. That Grey Ridge provoked violence. They cite missing manifests, allege you forged them. Aveline's stomach nodded. We have originals. Which will go missing, Marin said softly. If transport convoy ambushed tomorrow night. Elias frowned. You know of a plot? Caldwell's cousin, Silas Rourke, hired another band, Flat Mesa Irregulars. Ambush near Devil's Spine Canyon. Plan, burn transport wagon. Blame rebels. Aveline studied Marin's posture tense. Yet sincere. Why warn us? Marin exhaled. Because I want Caldwell ruined. And because the Irregulars killed my brother last season on a job. Revenge is expensive. I'd rather collect with justice. Evidence? Elias pressed. Marin produced ledger pages, signed orders, a blood-stained snake pin. Meet me at dawn behind the livery. I'll guide you through canyon path to set counter ambush. She stepped back into shadows. Bring 5 riders no more, or they'll smell trap. Then vanished like mist. Bramley and Helena emerged. From hiding, having heard everything. Debate spark. Trust ex-merc? Spring trap? Alert cavalry? But Harrow's detachment left morning for capital escort duty, half strength. Time slim. Aveline met Elias's eyes. She saw again those days in Stockade when no choice felt safe. We go, she said. If Caldwell erases that evidence. Grey Ridge's dawn dims again. Elias nodded grimly. Next dawn, 5 riders assembled behind livery. Aveline, Elias, Helena, Jory, still bandaged, and Major Harrow. He'd delayed departure, leaving cavalry under deputy command. Marin Holt awaited astride a lean roan. No insignia, just a revolver and coiled rope. They rode east under hushed sky, following deer trails across scrub flats. Sun-burned haze to pink. At noon they entered Devil's Spine Canyon, a winding chalkstone gorge pocked with caves, rumored. Hideout for contraband. Marin reined in beneath an overhang. Irregulars plan ambush at the Narrows, she whispered. 2 snipers on ridge, spike strip across pass, dynamite for wagon. Harrow produced spyglass, scanned ridgeline. See movement 2, maybe 3 silhouettes. Elias unslung. Rifle. We split. Helena and Jory circle north rim. Take snipers. Marin leads me to disable explosives. Aveline and Major draw band past False Ridge. Cut escape. Aveline swallowed. Dual nerves were dull candle compared to canyon silence, but she nodded. They split. Aveline rode with Harrow along canyon floor until they found vantage behind boulder. Minutes crawled. Suddenly echoing hoofbeats. Irregular scouts herding 2 pack mules laden with crates. Behind them, 6 riders escorting Caldwell's evidence wagon, 2 marshals bound on seat. Bruised. Aveline's breath quickened. Harrow whispered, "Wait for charges disabled." Up canyon, muffled thud like damp fireworks. Then Helena's. Rifle echo. Bandits jerked heads skyward. Aveline and Harrow spurred into open, rifles raised, hands. Harrow barked. Bandits shouted curses, drew guns. A fierce exchange erupted, shots ricocheting off chalk walls. Aveline fired, clipped. A rider's shoulder. Harrow dropped another's horse. Chaos. From ridge Helena whooped, sending snipers diving. Band leader, a scarred man with red kerchief wheeled, charging Aveline. She fumbled reload. Empty chamber clicked. Horse bore down, revolver leveled. Time slowed memories of Vetch's eyes when bullet hit. She pulled reins hard, Vesey veered. Gunshot ripped sleeve. Burning flesh. She screamed, pain white hot. Before Bandit could aim again, Elias vaulted from cave, tackling him off saddle. They rolled, fists flying. Aveline clutched, arm blood pulsed warm. She fought dizziness, drew secondary pistol, lined sight on. Bandit's head but hesitated, fear of hitting Elias. Harrow's carbine barked. Bandit slumped. Gunfire ceased. Irregulars scrambled away, some hobbling. Marin emerged hauling dynamite, bundle fuses severed. Helena and Jory descended, winded but grinning. Elias knelt, checking Aveline's wound graze across tricep. She hissed, "Just flesh." He pressed bandage torn from his shirt. Marshals untied, shaken, yet alive. Evidence crates intact. Harrow exhaled, relief palpable. Caldwell's petition just got heavier, chains. Marin watched, expression unreadable. Aveline approached, extending uninjured hand. "Thank you." Marin clasped it. "Debt paid. Watch your back, powerful men hire many serpents." She mounted roan, touched brim. "If you ever need another." Then rode into sunlit scrub and was gone. They returned to Grey Ridge past dusk. Townsfolk. Greeted with lanterns and soup. Aveline's arm stitched by Doc Green, memories of canyon still pulsing. She dozed in chapel pew, dreaming of wheat fields and serpents coiled in corn. She woke to Elias whispering. Harrow wired capital. Marshal court denied Caldwell's appeal. Trial proceeds here under circuit judge. Relief flooded. Yet, Elias's brow furrowed. But Caldwell's investors push to move hearing to city. They'll keep grasping. Aveline sat up, pain pricking arm. Then we keep planting truth. Outside, dawn glowed soft. Children chased butterflies amid blackened grass sprouting new green shoots, the prairie healing itself. Aveline stepped onto porch. She saw council hall throng with neighbors, supply wagons from Junction rolling in gratitude, and far beyond, horizon humming with possibilities and perils. She tightened the red band on healed wrist, felt pulse steady. The fight that began over. 2 ears of corn had become something vast, a testament that hunger might silence voices but never quell them. Thunder muttered, but this one promised rain, nurturing rather than flames. Aveline inhaled petrichor, exhaled resolve. At her back she sensed Elias. His hand slipped into hers. Together they walked down church steps toward crowd waiting for news, for plans, for next seeds. And as she opened her mouth to speak, shots cracked from courthouse roof. Shingles exploded. Townsfolk screamed, scattering. Aveline felt Elias yank her sideways as bullets chewed porch rail. A sniper, Caldwell's last loyal serpent, had chosen this dawn for vengeance. They dove. Behind stone wall. Aveline's pistol already clearing leather, heart thunderous. She peered past edge rifle muzzle flashed near bell tower. Elias shouted to Harlan for covering fire. Shutters splintered as Sniper swept courtyard. Children huddled behind water. Trough. Mrs. Temper dragged 2 by collars to safety. Aveline knew split second. Decision. Circle flank and open or wait for marksman to reload. Her breath steadied. Memories of duel aligning nerves. She whispered to Elias, "Cover left." Then sprinted right, boots skidding gravel. Bullet whined past ear, but she kept low, sliding under hitch rail. She heard Elias pop 3 rapid. Shots distraction. She dashed to stair ladder leading roof, ascended, each rung agony in arm. On rooftop, smoke lingered from rifle muzzle. Sniper, a gaunt youth, snake pin glinting, reloaded, unaware of her approach. She crept, footfalls. Masked by wind, he swung rifle toward crowd again, finger tightening. Aveline lunged, tackling him. Rifle discharged into sky. Both tumbled across shingles, stopping at gutter's edge. Pain flared along ribs. Youth snarled, drew dagger. She grabbed his wrist, twisted. Blade clattered. His other fist struck her temple, stars burst. They grappled, sliding perilously below. Townsfolk watched helpless. Elias shouted her name, began climbing. Sniper punched, scrambling for blade. Aveline hammered elbow into his jaw. He reeled but hooked fingers in her braid, yanking toward edge. She felt nothing beneath left boot sickle. Of sky yawning, adrenaline surged. She jammed palm under his chin, forcing head back, and drove knee into stomach. Grip loosened, they separated. She seized rifle strap across his chest, swung momentum, hurling him away from edge. He skidded, arms pinwheeling, fell through. Rotted shingle hole crashed into attic with groan, dust billowing. Elias reached roof, eyes wild. She gave shaky thumbs up, knees buckling. He caught her, hugging tight. Below, townsfolk cheered relief. Bramley escorted wounded youth from courthouse minutes later. Hands bound. Aveline sagged against chimney, heart still racing. The serpents kept striking, but each bite rallied anti-venom in souls of simple folk refusing to starve. That night, as Doc Green re-bandaged her temple, Aveline gazed out infirmary window at lanterns dotting streets like constellations spilled to earth. Elias perched beside cot, thumb stroking her knuckles. "I thought peace would come after Caldwell fell," she murmured. "But every day births new fights." Elias smiled, weary but unwavering. "That's what harvest is, constant weeding. But each seed you saved grows 10 more hands to help." She closed eyes, picturing corn rising tall, bending slowest in storms. In that image she found rest. Outside, the night folded quiet at last. But far east, under same stars, cables hummed with messages of rebellion and resistance. Word of a girl once starved for stealing corn, who now wielded hunger into hope. Her name carried by writers, her story too bright to be buried. Powerful. Men took note. And somewhere, Silas Rourke crumpled a failed report, ordering new plans in darker ink. Silas Rourke folded the telegram twice, pressed its creases with the flat of his thumbnail, and fed it to the lantern flame that guttered on the railway carriage's fold-down desk. Blue fire licked across the paper, devouring the words that proclaimed Caldwell petition denied. He watched until the cinders curled like dead millipedes, then ground them to powder with the butt of his ring. Outside the pane, the prairie fled westward, a blur of silver grass beneath a waxing moon. Inside the private car, the air tasted of scorched kerosene and colder things, ambition, resentment, the iron tang of unshed blood. He turned to the 2 figures waiting in the shadows near the coat rack. One was squat, with a boxer's nose and fingers the size of pine knots. The other tall, sallow, spectacles glinting like distant signal lamps. "Report," Silas said, voice a soft rasp. The tall one, Alcott, formerly of Pike's accounting corps, adjusted his glasses. The flat Mesa sortie failed. Evidence secured. Witnesses alive. Major Harrow returned to the fort with statements. Silas's jaw flexed. Casualties? 4, including the lieutenant. The rest scattered. Marin Holt disappeared. Find her, Silas ordered, turning to the boxer-built man. And you? Contact in Capital, says Judge Caro's docket, sets Caldwell hearing 3 days hence. We'll move before they convene. Silas lifted a silver hip flask, engraved with a serpent devouring its tail, but did not drink. Grayridge rallies around that girl. Heroes blind crowds to the smell of smoke. Flames reflected in his eyes. So we smother the fire. At its source. Aveline Caro woke to rain cool and insistent through the infirmary's cracked sash. Dreams of rifle cracks faded, replaced by dull ache in her bandaged arm and a heavier tension she could not name. She pushed upright. Cots around her were empty save for one miner snoring softly. Dawn had barely painted the windows pale. Yet the church bell tolled 3 slow peals that meant asterisk council. Emergency asterisk. She swung her feet to the rug and hissed when muscles protested. 4 days of battle and digging had sculpted bruises on bruises, but the town moved and she must move with it. She dressed quickly, shrugged into Elias's spare coat. He had pressed it into her hand sometime after the sniper incident, muttering about keeping warm, and stepped into the muddy street. Grayridge glistened in the rainless dawn. Soot washed from eaves, new glass glimmering in windows where bullet holes had been. She hurried toward the council hall, heart thumping unevenly, fear of new danger, and the bittersweet hope that each bell might signal rebuilding, not ruin. Inside, benches overflowed. Farmers in oilskins hunched beside townsfolk holding ledgers. Cavalry privates stood at easy attention. Even Doc Green leaned on his cane near the dais. At the front, Elias faced the assembly, Harrow at his side, Bramley clutching a telegram. Elias's eyes found Aveline the moment she slipped through the door. They softened, but his mouth was taut. Good, she's here, he said to the crowd. We'll begin. Bramley unfolded the telegram. Message from State Capitol, transmitted 2 hours ago. Quote, Asterisk Judge Caro and Marshal escort ambushed half-day west of Junction City. Coach overturned, horses killed, documents missing. Judge critically wounded. Expected arrive Grayridge by rail when conditions stable. Asterisk, end quote. He looked up, face ashen. A rustle shock, anger swept the hall. Judge Caro, no kin to Aveline, though the shared surname had caused many quips, was the circuit's last bastion of incorruptible jurisprudence. Without him the trial risked postponement, venue change, exactly what Caldwell's allies desired. Helena rose. Who attacks a judge in open daylight? Stagecoaches ain't subtle. Major Harrow's expression was granite. Rourke likely. Caldwell's money flows through that family. Aveline felt the room's air grow thin. Another blow, precise and deep. She stepped to the dais. When will the judge arrive? Tomorrow night on the 8:12 Freight Express, Harrow answered. He'll need surgery. We've requisitioned 2 surgeons from Fort Trenton. Elias placed a calming hand on the podium. Which means we must guarantee that train reaches Grayridge unmolested. Jory whistled low. It's 60 miles of track through open prairie, and after Devil's Spine, we know they'll sabotage rails. Then we ride with it, Aveline said before caution could intervene. Scout ahead, guard bridges. Harrow nodded slowly. Pilot locomotive runs 5 miles ahead of express. We could man it with sharpshooters, inspect track. Night riding, though hard to spot charges. Torches on cattle catchers, Elias suggested. And telegraph every half-mile post to relay clear or halt. Arguments, logistics, volunteer calls it blurred into motion. By mid-morning a plan solidified. 2 flat cars mounting lantern stands would precede the express, manned by a dozen. Riders including Aveline, Elias, Helena, Jory, and 3 Fort sharpshooters. Telegraph operators would key status codes. Any break in line would trigger flares, stopping the express behind. Afternoon sun found Aveline atop the water tower with Miss Gable's nephew stringing fresh wire along insulators. Her arm throbbed, but adrenaline dulled pain. She hammered ceramic caps, the rhythm steadying scattered thoughts. She fought not to imagine sabotage, derailments. Instead, she focused on the echo of each strike. A morse of purpose dot below, children. Chalked encouraging slogans on boxcars. Truth rides the strain, hunger can't shoot hope. The sight made her throat tight. She descended ladder. Elias waited, coaxing a smile. You keep climbing things, he teased. Easier to see tomorrow from height, she quipped, but her laugh cracked. He cupped her cheek. In his eyes she saw same fatigue, same relentless will. They stood in silence, rain-washed breeze fluttering red band on her wrist. Night fell layered in indigo. The pilot locomotive, nicknamed Torchbearer by rail hands, steamed at siding, headlamps shrouded with hood to direct beam. Downward, lantern masts glowed along flat-car decks. Harlan passed out coffee thick as tar, lacing some cups with rye, for courage, not aim. Evelyn checked her pistol, rifle, extra bandages. She mounted flat-car near front, Elias beside her. Helena straddled crate further back, cleaning shotgun. Jory, arms still splinted, manned telegraph key inside the caboose office rigged to. Receive front wire pulses dot as the 812's whistle echoed across prairie. Aveline swallowed unease. The express hissed into view, its string of passenger cars loaded with wounded judge, surgeons, and crates of unburned evidence. Firebox glow, painted wheels red gold. Crew flagged readiness. Harrow signaled with lantern arcs. Steam belched. Torchbearer lurched forward. Speed climbed to 20 miles an hour, faster than a man could sprint, slow enough for vigilant eyes. Moonlight silvered track. Prairie roses nodded in the slipstream. Somewhere a coyote yipped. Aveline scanned rail joints, beam ties, culverts. Illuminated by hooded lamp. Each milepost they tapped code, clear. Behind, the express chuffed steady. At mile 10, Jory's key crackled a query telegraph line dropping faint. Avalanche frowned, tapped diagnosis. It cleared. She resumed. Watch, the night air cooled, but tension kept sweat beating. 20 miles, farmland transitioned to chalk outcroppings. 30, they crossed Black Feather Bridge, torches revealing river below, calm under stars. Aveline held breath until wheels clattered onto solid grade again. Around mile 40, telegraph. His faltered signal fuzz. Aveline tapped, no response. She glanced to Elias. He lifted lantern, signaling engineer to slow. Train brakes squealed. Steel screeched. Then ahead, a faint glow too orange for lamp. Helena pointed. Upgrade fire. The engineer killed steam. Torchbearer coasted. Aveline and Elias leapt down, boots crunching ballast. They crept forward, rifles ready. Around curve lay a burning telegraph pole, wires severed. Flames crawled across arms, embers floating. Beyond, track vanished into unnatural darkness. No lamp revealed rails. Aveline's stomach sank. Bridge ahead they'd removed rails. Elias summoned others. With buckets from flat car they doused pole. Sparks hissed out. Harrow inspected. Grade, lantern shaking. Spikes pulled, rails slid aside. Derail zone, Helena muttered. But they set fire behind to cut line. Aveline peered into gloom. A ravine gaped beyond next rise. If express continued, disaster. Helena sprinted back to plant fuse flares. Crimson rockets soared, signaling halt. Distant, express whistle shrieked in response. Brakes howled, but ambushers struck. From grass, verge erupted rifle flashes. Bullets whizzed, pinging metal. Aveline dove, dust spitting. Harrow barked orders. Cavalry sharpshooters returned fire. Muzzle blasts SDROBED. Moonlit chaos. shadowy figures charging with blades to sabotage crew. Aveline fired at nearest, hitting thigh. She rolled, chambered, shot again, figure dropped. Elias grappled with attacker wielding hatchet. He parried with rifle butt, cracked jaw, attacker reeled. Helena's shotgun roared, scattering 2 more, but more shapes poured, maybe 20. The Express hissed behind, steam venting. Aveline's heart hammered. Too many to fend long, track ruined. She yelled to Elias, "We need rail back in place." He locked gaze, determination flared. "Cover me." He ducked toward rails, hefted iron bar with Harlan's help. Aveline shifted position, sighting, shooting at attackers diving from ridge. 1 bullet grazed her rib-searing kiss. She gasped, tightened grip, fired again. Target fell. Harrow's men formed wedge, pushing ambushers back with bayonets. Sparks from blades lit grim faces. Elias and Harlan dragged first rail onto ties, slamming spikes with sledge. Helena knelt, hammering opposite end. Sweat and blood splashed iron. Aveline and sharpshooters maintained curtain of fire. Ammunition dwindled. She ducked low, rummaging belt, 3 rounds left. Suddenly, a whistle horse neigh. A rider burst from darkness, silhouette lanky, rifle leveled straight. At Elias, on track. Aveline jerked up, aimed, but hammer fell on empty chamber. Time slowed, rider's finger tensed. Muzzle flash bloomed. She screamed Elias's name. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe." Now back to the story. The shot cracked. Echo swallowed by ravine. Elias jerked, staggered blood. Sprayed across gleaming rail. Aveline's scream tore raw. She snapped lever, found last cartridge, fired. Bullet struck rider's chest. He toppled, horse bolting. She sprinted to Elias. He knelt, hand pressed aside where crimson soaked. Shirt, eyes wide but lucid. "Just graze," he gasped, though blood seeped between fingers. Harlan hauled final rail, Helena driving last spike. Harrow signaled engineer. Clear short. Express whistle answered, slow advance, but ambushers regrouped for final rush. 10 maybe. 12, charging with pistols, torches. Aveline gulped ammunition spent. She lifted discarded hatchet, braced dot as attackers closed. Thunder of hooves rolled from east. From darkness surged a flank of mounted figures, rail yard teamsters led by Mrs. Temper of all people, broom raised like partisan spear. They crashed into ambushers, scattering them. One torch hurled high landed on railbed, sputtering. Pulled Elias across ties as express locomotive inched over restored track. Engineers white-knuckled. Cars squealed across. Passengers peered wide-eyed. Ambushers fled into night, pursuit giving chase. Rain finally broke, dousing remaining flames. Aveline cradled Elias under culvert lamp. Blood flow slowed, graze indeed. She bound wound with kerchief, tears mixed with rain. He touched her cheek. "Rail held," he whispered. She nodded. Words strangled. Grayridge platform erupted with cheers as Express rolled in at dawn. The wounded judge whisked to Doc Green's ward. Evidence crates guarded by double sentries. News of ambush thwarted spread faster than coals and stubble. Aveline, clothes stiff with mud and blood, stood beside Elias as surgeons stitched him. Council members pressed hands to hearts, gratitude. Shining, but Aveline's gaze drifted to east horizon where thunderheads brooded again. Each victory carved new scars. Each dawn delivered darker ink of Rourke's plotting. Doc Green patted her shoulder. "Judge says trial proceeds tomorrow noon, on schedule. He'll preside from bed if needed." Aveline exhaled a breath she'd been holding for days. But relief was fragile. Caldwell's lawyers still schemed. Elias squeezed her fingers, the red band now stained darker. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "truth gets its day in court." She allowed herself a small smile. Yet as she helped him to his feet, Movement in crowd caught her eye. Two strangers in crisp suits slipping away, serpent pins glinting. They vanished before she could pursue. A chill traced her spine. The courthouse walls might soon echo with more than gavels. Mid-morning haze settled when Aveline entered the old schoolhouse to fetch orphanage ledger requested by judge. The corridor smelled of chalk and damp slates. She pushed open archive door and froze. Shelves ransacked. Papers scattered, a lamp knocked over. And near the window, a figure rifled through stack of manifests, Silas Rourke himself. He looked up, smile cold. "Miss Caro," he purred. "Just retrieving property." Aveline drew pistol empty again. She cursed. Rourke chuckled, producing revolver. Evidence disappears, trial stalls. She backed toward hall. "Towns." "Outside, but you came alone." He stepped closer. She felt chalk dust sting eyes, despair creeping. Footsteps behind her, two more men blocking exit. Rourke lifted revolver. "Now you'll burn these files. Then we discuss how hunger can still be useful." Aveline's mind raced. Buying time? She raised chin. "You think I fear chains after stockade?" He smirked. "Not chain starvation, but perhaps you've grown fond of the taste." Gun cocked, her heart thundered. But from outside window came sudden whinny, Crash Elias, writing Bessie. Barrel rolling through glass in whirlwind of hooves and shards. Horse's shoulder slammed Rourke aside. Pistol fired wild, ricocheting. Aveline Dove seized spinning gun, leveled on stunned henchman, pulled trigger. Click empty, but bluff worked. He fled. Rourke staggered, blood at brow. Elias dismounted, cuffed him with rifle butt. Rourke crumpled. Aveline exhaled shaky laugh. "You keep bursting through windows." He grinned through painkiller haze. Less climbing. They bound Rourke, gathered scattered evidence. Outside, counsel rushed at commotion. As Rourke was hauled to jail, lightning cracked and rain poured, a cleansing torrent that hammered roof like drum of final verdict. But inside Aveline's ribs, thunder still echoed. She and Elias stood in rain, papers clutched tight, and he whispered, "One more night." She nodded, rain masking tears. Tomorrow would be the trial, and they would need every ounce of courage left. The coming of dawn was announced by a hush and almost sacred stillness that settled over Grayridge after weeks of gunfire, sabotage, and flaming horizons. Clouds hung low and bruised, but the rain had passed. Streets glimmered like black glass, reflecting lamplight and the prowling silhouettes of townsfolk already queuing for space in and around the courthouse. This Tuesday would pivot history, the first open trial in the territory where power, privilege, and starvation would stand accused at the same table. Aveline Caro awoke on a cot in dock, Green's front parlor to the distant rumble of wagon wheels, and the sweet faint scent of cornbread he had come to associate with early council breakfasts. For a heartbeat she lay still, savoring the miracle of quiet. Elias's coat was draped over her like a heavy quilt. She smoothed a hand across the worn canvas and smiled at the memory of him bursting through the schoolhouse window, eyes wild with equal parts fear and devotion. Her arm throbbed where the bullet's graze had stitched fire beneath skin. But the bandage was clean and new Doc Green worked late. She eased upright. Moon-white light poured through lace curtains. Across the room Major Harrow dozed in. A straight-back chair, cavalry jacket folded across knees, saber leaning against the mantel. His head lifted the moment Aveline's bare feet brushed floorboards. Could have slept in. He rasped, voice graveled by too many smoke nights. She shook her head, long list before the gavel. He stood, winced at a pulled muscle that made him press hand aside. They shared a look acknowledgement of debts impossible to repay, and then Harrow reached for the pot of coffee warming on small stove. "Counsel at 6, he said, pouring into tin mugs. "We post guards an hour before court opens." Aveline accepted mug, sipped, felt life bloom on tongue. "How's the judge?" "Restless," Harrow replied. "Bullet missed lung by half-inch. He insists on presiding from wheelchair." Aveline absorbed that, heart swelling with respect. Then her mind leapt to tasks. Witness order, manifest copies, shepherd children scheduled to testify how Caldwell's men rationed them stale grain. Each detail a stone in the foundation of truth. Doc Green swept in, hair a salt and pepper halo. "Out," he grumped with physician authority. "Both of you. Court isn't the place for fainting heroes." Aveline stiffened in mock offense. "Heroes don't faint, we merely recalibrate." Green snorted but pressed bread and apples into her satchel. "Eat, and if that arm splits, you're off the stand," she promised with fingers crossed. They both knew she would bleed rather. Then step aside. The courthouse, a 2-story limestone monument built in the heyday of Gray Ridge's post-war optimism, had never seen so many people. Miners in Sunday coats rubbed shoulders with freight haulers in patched leather. Helena stood at the top of the broad steps directing lineswomen to left, men to right, children allowed to sit on blankets under the sheriff's porch awning, where volunteers passed scones. Banners flapped. "Justice nourishes. Let only truth harvest." Aveline and Major Harrow pushed through to the entrance, escorted by 2 cavalry privates with bayonets fixed not against townsfolk, but as hedge against any last-moment serpent. Inside the foyer, candle sconces flickered. Elias waited near clerk desk, hair still damp from a quick wash, shirt collar crisp but rumpled at edges where his right hand kept checking the healing bullet graze on his flank. At sight of Aveline, he exhaled a breath he hadn't realized. He held. "I kept a seat," he said, pressing a folded parchment into her palm. "Closing outline." She scanned the headings: corn theft schema, Pinkerton contract trail, violation of grain compact, and nodded. Pulse steadying, time blurred. People poured in. Witnesses were ushered to antechambers. Caldwell was wheeled from jail in shackles, flanked by deputies Jory Weeks and Mrs. Temper, who wore the tin star Bramley had given her when he realized half the town already treated her like a deputy. Caldwell's mustache drooped. His eyes flipped doubtfully across the sea of faces, no longer basking in fear but searching for stray allies. There were few. Silas Rourke, wrists bound, sat behind him with a split lip from the window brawl. His lawyer, a pale man named Jericho Wills, whispered frantically, already drafting procedural objections. The judge arrived last, wheeled by Doc Green. Bandages swathed his chest, but his gaze was razor. Gavel in lap, he surveyed the hall, nodded once to Aveline recognition of the force that had kept him alive. He called the room to order. From the moment testimony began, tension crackled. Electric. Caldwell's counsel objected to jurisdiction. The judge overruled, citing emergency statutes invoked when a mayor was indicted inside his own municipality. Elias opened prosecution, his voice calm but weighted by weeks of toil. He walked the jury, 6 townsfolk and 6 from neighboring farms, through the grain compact, Caldwell's violations, the manifests Aveline had copied under duress. He presented physical evidence, Caldwell's ledgers with secret columns cross-referenced to bank drafts in his cousin's name. Aveline took the stand mid-morning. Every eye followed her path across floorboards. Whisper hush filled the gallery. She raised her bandaged arm, swore to tell truth. Caldwell's lawyer attempted to rattle her, asked why someone previously convicted of theft should be trusted. She answered plainly, voice ringing, "Because the grain I took was already paid for by the man who grows it, and I endured starvation in public view while Caldwell dined privately. If speaking that truth damns me, then let justice know no." Double standard. The jury's pen scratched fervently. Murmurs of admiration rippled. She recounted every step: hunger, stockade, Elias's intervention, the duel, the fire lines, the ambush at Devil's Spine, the sabotage of rails. She named names, provided times, described smells of burning wheat. And kerosene. She finished by holding up the red band, faded, blood-stained. Caldwell sees this as rebellion, she said. We call it a promise that no child in this territory will starve while grain lies in silos. Applause erupted. The judge's gavel rapped thrice, but even he failed to mask a thin smile. Caldwell's defense tried to discredit witnesses. Helena's freight records labeled hearsay. Harrow's cavalry logs claimed revision. Mrs. Temper's accounts dismissed as gossip. Yet each challenge crumbled against physical proof. When Marin Holt stepped forward unexpectedly, Harrow had tracked her to a boxcar outside town. She produced Caldwell's signature guaranteeing operational discretion to Pike's oathbreakers. Gasps, Will sputtered. Caldwell stared daggers. By dusk, prosecution rested. The judge recessed until morning for defense. The crowd spilled into square, buzzing with anticipation. That night Aveline couldn't find rest. After council supper, corn stew thick with barley, no irony lost, she slipped to the windmill on East Ridge. The sky spread trimmed with stars. Below, the town glowed like a hearth. She sensed someone ascend behind her. Elias. He draped blanket across her shoulders. You should sleep, he murmured. So should you. They sat on wooden platform, legs dangling. Crickets chirred. Aveline's thoughts wandered to trials beyond tomorrow, how to share harvest, how to repair rails, how to defend the valley from next drought. Whatever verdict, she said at length, Gorridge's work is just starting. Elias nodded. But if truth lands first punch, hope fights easier. She leaned into him, tension easing, eyelids drooping. He hummed a lullaby she dimly recalled, a seed song old farmers sang to coax corn roots deeper. She slept. Elias kept watch, staring at constellations until a shooting star burned north to south. He whispered a wish he dared not voice, one where Aveline's strength never had to sharpen in blood again. Behind them, unseen, a figure lowered spyglass and retreated into darkness, last serpent free, plotting dawn's desperate roll of dice. Trial resumed with Caldwell's defense. Lawyer Wills called a single witness, a rail magnate from the capital, who testified that Caldwell's private granaries were common practice for mayors safeguarding municipal assets. But under cross-examination, Harrow presented letters where Caldwell negotiated grain sale to that very magnate at wartime prices. Strategy collapsed. In a final gambit, Wills pleaded for mistrial, citing mob intimidation. The judge raised eyebrow. Mob intimidation was when this town's children starved beneath a mayor's watch, he said, voice quivering with controlled wrath. Motion denied. The jury retired. Within an hour they returned, 12 eyes fixed on Caldwell. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Sentence: permanent removal from office, restitution of grain stores, and transfer to territorial prison pending federal review. Applause exploded. Some wept. Caldwell slumped, mustache drooping. Rourke cursed shackles. Rattling, Aveline sat stunned, months of fear distilled to this fragile sheet of verdict paper. She looked at Elias. His smile trembled, tears bright. Yet even as gavel fell, thunder cracked outside, this time literal. Doors flew open. A sodden cavalry private stumbled in. Explosion at rail yard. He gasped. Saboteurs hit grain depot, fire spreading toward water tower. Chaos. The judge commanded order, but townsfolk rushed out. Sky beyond windows glowed orange. Aveline's pulse spiked. Caldwell's last play. Rourke's all eyes. She and Elias sprinted, boots splashing through rain puddles. Smoke rolled down Main like a stampede. Flames licked the base of the water tower, creosote-soaked supports crackling. If tower fell, town's only reservoir lost. If fire reached fuel shed, secondary explosions would level 3 blocks. Branley rallied bucket lines, but wind fanned embers. Helena screamed from rail yard that dynamite had blasted depot doors. Aveline scanned gloom for shapes caught glimpse of two riders galloping east. She pointed. Elias bolted to Mount Bessie. "I'll cut them," he yelled. She grabbed his sleeve. Not alone. But sirens of urgency parted them. He swung into saddle, charging after saboteurs. Aveline turned to Tower Green, and a teenage blacksmith fought flames with wet blankets. She seized Bucket Brigade, shouting rhythm. Steam hissed. Flames retreated, but tower legs groaned. Then a cry. "Sparks on roof row!" She glanced to sawdust store roof shingles aflame. She dashed for ladder, heart hammering. Rain began in earnest, but wind gusted. She climbed, arm wound reopening. At top she hacked burning shingles free with hatchet, booting them off. Fire hissed under deluge. Below, tower timbers moaned, one brace collapsing. Water sloshed overhead like temperamental sea. Aveline realized, if tower toppled, weight would crush half the bucket line. She shouted to clear, scrambled down ladder. Legs jelly. At base, she helped Green drag hoses from steam pump. 3 blasts of water battered flames. One nighted spark soared, landed on Caldwell's jailhouse roof. Fate thick with irony. Townsfolk were everywhere now, forming new lines. Axes splitting smolder wood. Children passing canteens. Mrs. Temper stormed from church with pew cushions to beat sparks. Slowly the orange glow dulled to sullen red, then to steaming charcoal. The water tower listed but stood. The depot roof gone, but grain inside safe. Aveline slumped against rail crate. Breath ragged, mind on Elias. Minutes ticked, rain blurred. Sight, then the rhythm of hooves. Through smoke Elias emerged atop Bessie, hair plastered, lead rope hauling 2 bound saboteurs. Crowd cheered, exhaustion transmuting to euphoria. Elias slid down, stumbled. Aveline caught him. He pressed. Forehead to hers, no more serpents. She exhaled, tension draining. Yet even as relief blossomed, a sharp thunderclap cracked overhead. No lightning proceeded. Elias jerked. Blood spurted from side of neck. A rifle shot. From dark alley flash glowed hidden gunmen. Aveline screamed, lowered Elias, pressed. Hands to wound. He gasped, eyes wide with shock. "Stay," she pleaded. People scattered. Someone pursued Shooter, rain mixed with crimson on her palms. Doc Green sprinted, sliding to knees, opening bag. "Hold pressure, girl." Everything muffled. She heard her own heart louder than storm. Elias's lips moved. She bent. "Corn belongs." "Remember." Tears washed his face. She sobbed. Pressing harder, Green worked needles gauze. Minutes a blur. At last Green exhaled. "Bullet missed artery. He'll live if we keep him still." Aveline's knees buckled. She caressed Elias's hair as he slipped into unconsciousness. Bramley returned gripping. Captured Shooter, a lanky clerk from Rourke's crew. Serpent pin still wet with rain. Mrs. Temper slapped him thrice before deputies pulled her off. Aveline's. Rage boiled under skin, but Green ordered Elias carried to clinic. "Go with him," Bramley urged. "Trial's done." "Town owes you quiet." She shook head. "Justice isn't quiet." But grief choked words. They transported Elias on litter. Aveline walked beside, not feeling her feet. Rain tapered. To drizzle. Dawn-tinted sky gold again. At clinic door she paused. Town bells rang victory tolls overshadowed by morning hush. Inside, Green prepared surgery. Aveline pressed her lips to Elias's forehead. "Hold," she whispered. "Storms bend the tallest corn slowest." She exited to porch. Crowd awaited, faces streaked with soot and tears. Caldwell led away, Rourke in chains, saboteurs. Shackled, yet she saw fear lurking. If Elias died, flame of hope might gut her. She straightened, squared shoulders. "My friends," she said hoarsely, "one man's bullet won't starve this town." We'll guard our own until every serpent is dust and every field golden. Thunder grumbled distant, but a shaft of sunlight pierced clouds, striking the courthouse weather-vane corn sheaf wrought in brass, setting it ablaze with morning fire. Aveline stared at Beacon, pulse steady again. She would stand until Elias rose to stand beside her, or until the prairie itself crumbled. And beyond horizon, other towns would soon need the same courage. She inhaled, tasting petrichor and copper, and turned to the people. There was still a harvest of hope to sow, and storms yet to weather. Weather, the word lingered in Aveline's mind like the final plucked note of a hymn, vibrating through marrow even as the first shafts of morning light crawled across the muddied boards outside Doc Green's porch. The sky was still half ash, half rose, and the air smelled of drenched cedar shingles, burnt powder, and honeysuckle snared on the fence posts. She felt as though the town itself were breathing slow, ragged, but no longer wheezing with fear. Each inhale drew in the scent of possibility. Each exhale purged another measure of dread. Yet inside the clinic, Elias Quinn's breathing thin and wet-sounding through cracked lips held her in place like an anchor. She remained by the cracked sash, watching over him through a haze of exhaustion so total her knees threatened to fold. Still, she would not retreat, not until Doc Green stepped from the operating room doorway with a reassuring nod. "Lost more blood than I like," the physician murmured, wiping his spectacles across a square of linen, but the slug only kissed the carotid. "Stitched and sealed. Give him 2 weeks of broth and quiet, and he'll be fit to run a harvest crew." Aveline's shoulders sagged, tension draining. The weight made her sway. Green guided her to a chair beside the bed. "Now you must breathe," he said, voice gentle into the tone he reserved for feverish children. "If either of you collapses, my docket doubles." A ghost of a smile tugged her lip, then faltered as Elias stirred. His eyelids fluttered, lashes damp with fever sweat. When gray eyes focused on her, relief flooded their depths. "Still here," she whispered. He offered a rasp of a laugh. "Wasn't going anywhere." "Town nearly burned twice in one day," she reminded him. He winced at the memory. "Did we save the tower?" She nodded. "And the grain?" "Caldwell's gone. Rourke is shackled. The serpents are out of venom." "Good," Elias breathed, and drifted again into healing sleep. 3 days passed in a tumble of mending and decision-making. Word of Caldwell's conviction spread along the telegraph lines faster than the judge's written summary could. "Be sealed." Within 48 hours, neighboring townships sent delegations bearing casks of cider and wagons of lumber. Thanks for the example Grayridge had set. The judge, still bound to bed, signed orders installing an interim council formed by proportional vote of town and outlying farms, dissolving the old alderman system that had allowed Caldwell to stockpile power. Aveline found herself nominated to chair the newly minted Grain Equity Committee, a post whose duties felt both obvious and terrifying. Audit every silo from Whisper Fork to the Junction Spur, codify communal distribution reserves, and establish transparent ledgers. She accepted on 2 conditions: that minutes be open to any citizen literate enough to read them, and that those who could not read would be taught by volunteers using the very same ledgers as lessons. The council agreed, and quickly discovered volunteers abundant. Miss Gable's schoolhouse swelled with adults in the evenings, calloused hands clumsy around chalk as they sounded out words like manifest and reconciliation. Within a week, Elias, propped in a padded chair on Doc Green's porch, was mapping a cooperative irrigation project that tied 6 independent farms to a rebuilt water tower via an ingenious gravity-fed trench. He claimed it was merely practical geometry, but Aveline saw in the penciled lines a quiet audacity. Water would no longer respect property lines. It would serve need before deed. Still, Silas Rourke's sentencing loomed. Martial escorts scheduled. His transfer to the capital, but rumors flitted that investors planned one final snatch. The new council voted to send a mixed escort, 2 cavalry, 2 town deputies, and Aveline herself, because the people refused to let distant prosecutors twist testimony in secret. Elias tried to argue healing wound, risked too fresh, but Aveline squeezed his hand gently. "Storms bend the tallest corn slowest," she said. "They don't uproot it." That had been his proverb, and now she wielded it like a talisman. Doc Green cleared her for travel, stitching protective padding over the graze. Jory Weeks, arm nearly mended, volunteered as 3rd deputy. Mrs. Temper insisted on packing half the freight wagon with fresh loaves, lest city folk forget the taste of honest crust. Helena provided 2 relays of horses hidden along the route and taught Aveline the whistle, calls her father once used as a scout on the frontier. They set out at moonrise on the 6th of Ember's month, cuffed prisoners in center of column, wagon flanked by riders. The prairie was silver quiet, stars pricking the sky like sugar spilled on slate. Halfway to Hill Point Station, a coyote howled. The marshals tensed, but no ambush came. At dawn, with Hill Point's water tank in sight, a single rider approached. Under truce flag. Aveline recognized Marin Holt as she reined in, face hooded, serpent pin replaced by a plain leather tie. "Message," Marin said, voice urgent. "A banker's coach waits in Hill Point with armed guardsmen. They mean to bribe the station master and stage a derailment east of the Ridge Pass." The senior marshal frowned. "You expect us to trust Trader's word?" But Aveline had already seen the truth in Holt's tension. "She warned us before," Aveline told him, "and we're still breathing." Plans shifted. They circled wide north of the station, moving through scrub until they found the banker's cohort dismantling track plates. A swift skirmish erupted, no shots, only clubs and fists, and ended with the saboteurs hog-tied beside their coach. Among confiscated papers, Aveline discovered receipts linking the banker's firm to Caldwell's old shell accounts. By the time the escort reached the capital, newspapers were already hungry for the scandal. Journalists ambushed Aveline outside the courthouse. She answered every question with calm clarity, refusing to let sensationalism muddy fact. She testified Rourke was sentenced, and within a month, Caldwell's remaining assets were seized too. Pay restitution grain, coin, and 3 vacant lots earmarked for a public granary, a technical school, and a free clinic wing under Doc Green's stewardship. Season's turn arrived while legal dust settled. Autumn's sharpened air and gilded prairie grass copper. Elias walked without cane by then, though Aveline insisted on carrying the heavier ledgers when they visited farms to finalize yield pledges. They traveled by wagon sporting a freshly painted crest, a sheaf of corn crossed by a quill dot in Whisper Fork Valley. They helped dig the first communal irrigation ditch, hands blistering, together in cold dirt. In Junction East, they spoke to ranch girls about balancing books and shooting straight. In Cedar Ridge, rebuilt after Pike's raid, they shared coffee with a new mayor who carried no mustache and stored council ledgers on open shelves. Nights, they camped beneath star quilts and argued amicably over crop rotation. Elias confessed. He was thinking of planting barley alongside corn. "Diversity is resilience," he said. Aveline teased him that he'd been reading too many treatises by traveling scientists. Still, she drew diagrams in the dirt, enthralled by new possibilities. On the first frost morning, Aveline began to notice a hush between heartbeats when Elias looked at her a certain way, like sunlight through barn slats, bright and warm. She caught herself imagining what it might be to stay beside him always. Not as co-rebels, but as something gentler. She was still rolling the thought across her tongue weeks later, when Elias surprised her outside the repaired water tower. He produced a ring fashioned from a brass telegraph nut, polished to soft gleam. "Made from the line that carried truth," he explained, cheeks pink with nerves. "Thought we might keep the circuit closed." Aveline laughed, cried, said yes, and promptly scolded him for kneeling on a damp plank while his stitches were barely healed. They married under a lattice of dried corn stalks. The aisle a footpath of milled barley straw. Mrs. Temper officiated. Grayridge had elected her mayor by unanimous shout when she tried to decline. Helena played fiddle. Jory read a passage from the newly printed grain charter. Doc Green, tears stuck in his whiskers, stood witness at the reception. Children darted between tables laden with pies baked from the recovered harvest. No one counted portions. Hunger, once a specter haunting every alley, had become a memory close. Enough to honor, distant enough not to choke. Songs rose, some rowdy, some solemn. And when dancers formed the circle around Aveline and Elias, she felt as though the world itself spun beneath their boots. They moved into the farmhouse east of town. Evenings, they sat on the porch with ledgers and star maps. Some nights turmoil. Returned letters from counties still under tyrant thumbs, requests for help. They answered each appeal with advice, shipments of seed, or dispatch of Grayridge Riders volunteers who carried both bullets and books. Whenever doubts pressed, Evelyn touched the red band now sewn into her coat cuff and remembered the stockade sun. Pain can be compost if courage turns it. Winter arrived like a hush, and with it the first assembly of the Prairie Grain Confederacy delegates. From 12 towns meeting in the Grayridge courthouse. They debated, disagreed, laughed, and eventually signed the Cornfield Compact, a covenant that forbade hoarding, mandated public ledgers, and established mutual aid protocols for drought, blight, or fire. Elias whispered to Aveline that laws are just fences. People are the posts. She squeezed his hand, feeling the pulse of 1,000 unseen hands behind theirs. Spring thaw brought one last echo of the serpents. A letter arrived bearing no return address, ink precise. The hungry always return. Within a week, wagons. Reported theft of seed on the far border, and rumors spoke of Pike's remnants resurfacing under another banner. Aveline convened Grayridge's council at dawn. She laid the letter on the long table, palm steady. "The world will always offer drought," she said. "Our answer remains water." They voted to expand the Rider Network, institute roaming agronomists, and fund traveling teachers. Fear would not take root if seeds of knowledge were sown first. Elias approached later, voice low. "A lifetime of vigilance?" She leaned into him, eyes bright. "A lifetime of planting. The serpents can gnaw, but they can't eat every kernel." He chuckled, then winced as healed scar pulled. She kissed the spot through his shirt and felt his laughter ease. Midsummer. Clouds stacked tall and white, the valley green as new. Glass, the irrigation ditches glittered like silver ribbons. Barley swayed tawny. Corn tassels danced in wind that smelled of rain and sun, baked soil. Aveline stood on the farmhouse porch, hand resting on a belly just beginning to round beneath. Her cotton dress. A hush of awe filled her life sprouting inside, seeded from hope's harvest. Elias stepped behind her, arms circling. "Storm line to the west," he murmured, but there was no fear in his tone. They watched the thunderheads crawl like gray ships, and as first drops struck, Aveline's laughter rolled across the field. Rain, once omen of fire or flood, now promised abundance. Thunder boomed an amen. She pressed Elias's hand to her stomach. "This child will never know what it means to starve." "No," he agreed softly, "only what it means to share." She closed eyes, breathing the petrichor of endless beginnings. 2 years later, a traveling journalist with a notebook full of blank pages arrived in Grayridge. He'd come chasing rumors. A girl once chained for theft now leading a grain confederacy. A farmer who tamed mercenaries with shovel and hope. A town that turned hunger into a festival of generosity. He expected exaggerations, he found instead a harvest market where goods moved on trust, ledgers posted on street boards, and children reciting math with bushel tallies. He found a cemetery where Caldwell's victims rested, beneath headstones carved from granite Caldwell had imported for his own mausoleum. At dusk he found Aveline Caro Quinn leaning over the stockade, post kept as a monument telling wide-eyed, "Kids how storms can be teachers." He asked for an interview. She smiled, adjusting the red band at her cuff, the brass nut ring glinting. "I'll tell you anything," she said, "except how to give up." He asked what single moment turned the tide. She looked toward the farmhouse where Elias played. Harmonica, their toddler clapping along. "There was no single moment," she said. "Hope harvests slowly. But one day you realize the granary is full and no padlock bars the door." The journalist scribbled for hours. When he left, he paused at the town sign now freshly painted. "Gray Ridge, where corn and courage grow." Beneath it, the Confederacy motto in smaller script, "Plenty is a promise we keep together." He tipped his hat and rode on, carrying a story. Too bright to hide, Aveline walked home under a sky rinsed purple by sunset. Wheat rustled. Crickets tuned their fiddles. On the porch Elias rocked their daughter, her hair wild, her laugh like bells. Mrs. Temper sat beside them, knitting a scarf in the council colors. Doc Green dozed with a cat on his lap. Peace, Aveline thought, was not quiet but a chorus of ordinary miracles. She joined them, slipping into Elias's free arm. He kissed her forehead. "Council tomorrow," he reminded. "Corn won't count itself," she quipped. "Lucky it has you." She looked out at fields bathed in gold. "Lucky it has us." Lightning flickered on distant horizon. Summer storm again, but she felt no tremor of dread. The tallest corn bent slowest indeed, but its roots ran deep now, tangled with 1,000 hands and hearts. The prairie could whip and roar, yet these stalks would rise, tasseled and defiant, feeding generations. Aveline held her family, her town, the wide world ahead, all in a gaze bright as dawn. And she whispered a vow that floated on wind to every farm and river bend. "No one will starve in silence ever again." The wind carried her promise, rustling corn leaves like applause. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.